Welcome, everybody. Good evening. I'll just give our IT team a moment to make sure we are live. So welcome everybody to our Community Safety Town Hall. Appreciate your time and coming. This evening we will have some opening comments from your panelists that you see before you this evening. And then we'll open it up for Q&As. Thank you everyone for submitting your questions beforehand. If you haven't already, there are cards at the back. And should you think of other questions, you're welcome to fill out those cards as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Mayor James.
Thank you. This is not a regularly scheduled council meeting. There is a quorum here. There will be no direction tonight. There will be no votes by council. So consequently, it's your show more than it is our show. And I'm going to introduce the panelists. To my right is Chief Tony Benfield, Captain Tony Benfield of the Orange County Sheriff's Department. Scott Smith, the city attorney. Councilmember Knobloch to my far left. He does not want to. He feels uncomfortable with that.
I'm on the right side.
There you go.
Left side of the
Mayor Pro Tem Chris Duncan here, and also we have the city clerk to make sure we don't do anything stupid while we're here. She will watch us continuously. We have Rick Loeffler, you're chair of the Public Safety Committee. You're right up here.
Oh, yeah, he was trying to avoid that.
He was trying to avoid that.
Wait, so I'm between the right and the left? Is that what?
Exactly.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
And
Am I the middle?
And we do have a couple of appointed officials. We have a couple of appointed officials. This is Nick Murata right here of the Public Safety Committee. Wave at everyone, Nick. And Cameron Cosgrove of Planning is here. And finally, I want to introduce Assemblywoman Lori Davies right there in the red. And I think, yeah, where's, oh, there's Larry. Larry.
Oh, Society? Larry Culberson, president.
No, I'm trying to think. You just, the Historical Society, Larry Culbertson, thank you.
Right.
So, we're going to start off with comments from the panelists, and, I'll start off with my two colleagues from City Council, and then go with Mr. Loeffler of the Public Safety Committee, move over to Chief Benfield of Police Services, and I don't know, Scott, I don't think you have an opening comment you want to make? Okay. So, Mr. Knobloch.
Well, I think obviously we're here concerned about crime in our city, and crime in San Clemente needs to be reversed. We all live in this town because we love this beautiful town, and I'm committed to do whatever it takes to address the crime issues in San Clemente, keep our city beautiful, safe, and a small town orientation. First off, the increase in crime in San Clemente is proof that national issues do affect us here in San Clemente. The Democrats who run San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles, they've run those cities into the ground and are making large portions of their cities into disgusting feces-laden hellholes. And we're beginning to see portions of that in San Clemente. And we need to make sure that doesn't happen. The number of things we're going to be discussing tonight, hopefully we'll get some good suggestions on how to reduce the crime here in San Clemente. But I'd like to start off by saying that we have a limited number of police officers, about 40 plus. And we have a lot of people in this town that care about our community. We have an RSVP volunteer program, seniors, that assist the police department, but we could expand that program with younger people, not just retired, but younger people. I think we literally have hundreds of people in this town that would volunteer to be the eyes and ears of our police department and help, especially in communities like Talega, where they're getting these surreptitious burglaries and they're secretive, these gangs that are coming in. So I think we need to expand not only the RSVP volunteer program to assist the police, but also the code enforcement volunteers for the homeless encampments, where a lot of crimes, a lot of drugs are taking place. We had a code enforcement volunteer program, but when COVID hit, that system shut down. So we don't have that operation now, but we need to re-up it and we need to man it. In addition to that, and I'm sure Captain Dunfield will speak on this, we need to focus our police department, we need to marshal the resources on the hot spots, just like we've been doing successfully in Talega to catch some of those the Chilean gang members. So that's very important. The level of the police also will be discussed, and that's an issue we need to look at. Let me just say also, elections have consequences, and we have people that are running our town that speak, and in politics, it's easy to speak a good game, but your actions sometimes speak louder than words. We've had city council members that have marched with BLM, fists raised in the air, how to, pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon, and that's problematic. And organizations like BLM, Antifa, and the Democrat Party have endorsed, sponsored, and supported candidates. We've got a number of them running for council right now, supported by a party that supports Antifa, BLM, Occupy Wall Street, and recently in Sacramento, the Democrat-led legislature has cut the funding for gang investigations, which is having a direct impact on our police services in Southern California, especially South Orange County, not only San Clemente, but our surrounding cities. So, elections have consequences, and everyone says, this is a nonpartisan race. What are you talking about politics? I gotta tell you, the values, the philosophy, and the conduct of parties will determine the safety in this city for years to come. We all have the power to reduce crime, and we need to make sure we vote for people in the future that run on a strong pro-police and low-crime platform. So those are my opening comments.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Duncan, please.
Well, I will try to keep this brief because we all want to hear from you. Public safety is my number one priority, because if you're not safe in your community, you cannot reach your full potential, right? And I say that as a father, a former prosecutor, longtime career Homeland Security attorney. That's where I devoted my career. And so working with law enforcement officers and national security professionals to ensure our communities are safe. That's why I joined up after 9/11, frankly, right, to make sure that never happened again. Now we see in our town, though, people feeling unsafe and insecure. That's not acceptable, right? And so with the recent crime waves, I'm proud that we stepped up, supported additional funding, supported additional support for our police services, and we were able to address gang activity in the Maxburg Park area and in Talega, where I live, the rash of burglaries. And because we stepped up, and actually because of all of you stepped up, really, that's what I'm the proudest of, is the community coming forward and asking for help and letting us know, hey, this is what we need to do, right? We don't get a new brain when we get elected. We need to hear from you, and that's why I'm glad we're doing this today. But because the community came together and spoke up, we were able to get additional resources in from the Sheriff's Department. We caught one crew of burglars who were in fact Chilean nationals that were operating in Talega. And so we can make that difference when we all come together, right? And so I'm hoping that's what this is the start of today. I know I will be working to provide whatever support our police services need and our other law enforcement officers to make sure we address the increased crime in our city so that families like mine can go back to feeling safe, because it's not okay. And so I'm glad we can be here to do that, and I will certainly be looking forward to the comments and answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Loeffler.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's nice to see a good turnout. Real quick, I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee. We're made up of a group of 5 individuals that have public safety backgrounds. I'm retired LAPD. one of my partners there, Nick Bracuda, is retired LA County Sheriff. We also have a couple of fire department professionals on our team also. And what we do is we take direction from the council to look at possible strategies in combating crime. And we've done that. We've come out with several ordinances out of our committee, which have been passed by the council to help battle different problems in the community, and I'm proud of that. Would like to welcome everybody of all political persuasions here, as compelling as it is. The fact is, as citizens here, we've got Democrats, we got Republicans, we got libertarians, non-party preference. Everybody can be a victim of a crime, and we all have to come together to fight this together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Captain Benfield.
Thanks, Mayor, and good evening. Thanks for coming out. I appreciate the opportunity to engage with you all and hear some of your comments and concerns, kind of work together, find some solutions if we can, or at least ways to mitigate some of these issues, and hopefully clarify some of the information or at least the perception that crime has increased, or that it's more dangerous now than ever in San Clemente. And just to kind of sum that up, the data just simply doesn't bear that out. I will tell you, for probably a couple reasons, that in 2020 and 2021, right, the years of the pandemic, 2020, everything was shut down, people were within their homes, so you could imagine crime fell in nearly every category. Calls for service dramatically decreased. 2021, we were in this weird, we're half in, we're half out, we're open, we're closed again. So the numbers remained fairly consistent with 2020. So those 2 years are somewhat of an anomaly if you look further back, 2018, 2019, with San Clemente's historical crime data. And although there's a perception that crime has increased, that homelessness has increased, that simply isn't the case. And I blame those prior 2 years where it was quieter for that perception, and that's totally understandable, and I can appreciate everyone's concern. Any crime is too much crime, we can all agree. We want it to go down regardless if it's increasing or not. That's our goal. The aim of the Sheriff's Department of San Clemente Police Services is to keep you all, your family, and your property safe. That's our top priority, our number one concern. And we have a number of resources and details that you've heard some of tonight dedicated toward that effort. So I'm looking forward to the comments and engaging. There's a couple key points that I guarantee you we're going to go across tonight, maybe burglaries, maybe homelessness, crime in general. I'm happy to engage with you on those topics, or anything else that you can think of, that you have questions, curiosity. You've heard rumor. Social media is probably my least favorite thing, but it's great for instant information, but there's a caveat that it's not always accurate or vetted information. And in many towns, including this one, we have seen numerous examples of social media really exacerbating an issue to make it look far more prevalent than it is. And again, the disclaimer here is I appreciate and I understand any crime is too much crime. But we are not on a scale of something we haven't seen before. The couple areas where I tell you where crime does appear to be increasing this year, although we still have 2 full months of data and we haven't even seen October's full numbers yet, are assaults. Those look like they're ticking up a little bit, and obviously burglaries. But even in the case of burglaries, if that number trails off for the next 2 months, we'll be very consistent with where we were in 2019, which is what I'm using as kind of our baseline, because 20 and 21 were so low. As of October 10th, we still had 2 fewer burglaries in this city than we did in 2019. Now, granted, 2.5 months left to go, we'll probably beat that number. But if we can keep a lid on it, I don't think that rise is going to be significant. Only time will tell. We can report back at the beginning of the year, something in the first few months of the year. Once we get the crime data pulled for 2022, we can do an annual report for the city and go over exactly what they look like. But by all indications, what's important is how the community feels, right? And if you don't feel safe, then we can all work together and identify solutions or ways to try to improve that. And we're open. I don't have all the answers, I'll tell you right now. We're open to all suggestion and input, and working together, I'm sure we can create some sort of solutions, ways to try to manage this perception or this feeling of not being safe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
if I could jump in, sorry,
Yeah,
I just
sure.
cut
Go
you
ahead,
off.
please.
Incredibly rude. I also have a deputy who works with our Behavioral Health Bureau. He used to be a San Clemente deputy. Now he's assigned full-time to the Behavioral Health Bureau. That's mental health and homelessness. And he's on his way with his partner, who is a full-time mental health clinician. It's a co-responder model. I'd love for him to have an opportunity to explain to you what the Behavioral Health Bureau is. I know it's been a few years since San Clemente has had a presentation on it. This won't exactly be a presentation, more of an overview. But if you had any specific questions of that, or there's some misunderstandings about what our capabilities are with homeless and maybe what some of our limitations are, he'll be able to clear those up. And then, of course, I'm happy to field any specific San Clemente homeless questions.
Thank you, Tony.
Yeah.
So the need for this town hall, I think, serves as testimony to a failure by the city to provide the perception of a safe and secure environment. We can talk all day long whether it's reality or whether it's perception. The data would suggest that a burglary in Talega is a property crime. However, if some thug and felon from a foreign country breaks into your house and takes stuff out of your house, invades your home, that may in theory be a property crime, but that's a pretty personal crime. Mm-hmm. And we've got to take that into account. One of the things I looked at is the city has 5 strategic priorities for 2022-2023. And one of the things we missed, city council missed it, city management missed it, there's not one bullet point about public safety. That's a huge miss, and I apologize for that miss. And one of the things I will introduce on our November 1st meeting, I hope I get the support of 2 other council members on this, is to not only put it in retroactive for 22-23, but also ensure it's in every year thereafter. That's a real failure on our part that we missed that. Each of you will get an opportunity to pose your questions tonight, and we'll answer your questions, and I will stay here till the cows come home answering your questions. They may not be great responses, but they'll be the best response I can give. I want to put something in perspective for you. Our budget is approaching 50% of our budget is dedicated to public safety. Plus, we've got another $15 million left over from 1993 from the old San Clemente Police and Fire Department, $15 million of unfunded pension liability we have to pay. Council after council has kicked that down the road. That may not sound like a public safety issue, but indeed it is a public safety issue because it will drain resources and assets from our public safety resources in order to pay that down. Additionally, so of that $50 million, $26 million is to the OCSD contract. Currently, the Association of Orange County Sheriff's Deputies are involved in labor negotiations with the Board of Supervisors. And they're putting a lot of money into candidates for supervisor who are willing to give the deputies a lot of money. I hope the deputies are treated fairly, but also I hope the taxpayers are treated fairly as well. And because we're getting to the point of we're spending so much on public safety, something's going to have to give somewhere else. And other cities have a bigger problem than we do, but I want to make sure we take care of our problem before it becomes acute. Within 500 yards of where we sit right now, there are at least 20 vehicles that people are sleeping in. 500 yards from here, 20 vehicles. Aaron Washington and I drove that the other night at 11 o'clock at night, and there are a lot of vehicles. And that's of concern to me. Who are these people? Recently, the city of Fontana did a survey and found 30% of all vagrants, homeless, unhoused, whatever you want to call them, 30% were sex offenders. We don't know who these people are. They're coming to our town. They're staying in our town. They are a problem, and we need to become innovative on how we need to deal with that problem. The city and OCSD needs to have that conversation on what that innovation looks like. The council and code and park rangers and our homeless outreach person, we need to become innovative. We need to push these people along. They should, we have a special community here. I don't want to become the hellhole that San Diego has become, or LA, or Long Beach, or for that matter, Santa Ana. We've got to stop this. We've got to nip this in the bud right now. I used to go to a restaurant in Santa Monica, and the 10, 12 years ago, the homeless problem was problematic. Today, it's out of control. We cannot allow it to become out of control in our city. And, finally, a couple things I'm going to push for. I'm going to push for reviewing how we can have a relationship with OCSD that involves innovation on this homeless issue. OCSD actually did a great job, and I applaud Captain Venfield and his team on apprehending these thugs and felons from a foreign country. And hopefully they don't come back. We need to figure out how to capitalize on the city assets we have in dealing with this vagrant problem, dealing with these broken down RVs. Go to the trailhead of the beach trail at North Beach. You can't stand there. Why can't you stand there? Because the stench of urine and feces is so strong, all you can do is hold your breath and keep on walking. These are people with mental health issues. These are people with drug addiction and alcohol problems. And I only know of one who's from South Orange County, and he's from Dana Point, and he's here. This is a problem that's been put upon us. The homeless advocates, the advocates for vagrancy will say housing is the problem. They're lunatics. They're uninformed. That does nothing but spend taxpayers' money and does nothing for the problem. We've got to figure out how to move these people along, and I don't have an answer for that. But I do know we don't want to become LA, San Diego, Santa Ana, or any of those manure holes that have been created by the policies that have come out of Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and by the left-wing justices, by the left-wing judges at the Ninth Circuit of Court of Appeals. And with that, we'll go to question and answer.
Thank you. So bear with me. We have quite a number of questions, and many of these questions, sorry, Captain Benfield, may be going to you. What is the mode of entry in the Talega burglaries, and what can we do to prevent them?
So just to clarify, by mode of entry, do they mean into the residences? Yeah, so there are different groups of people doing burglaries, all for the same reason, right? For valuables, for cash, some for weapons. They have different, we'll say, patterns, MOs, criminal signatures. The one that has captivated this city and many, many others are related to South American theft groups, right? Their pattern, if you will, is almost invariably entry through a backyard that typically backs up to some sort of an undeveloped area or a green belt or a walking path, a canyon area. Quite frankly, it's because it's for ease of access, right? They're not going to be noticed. It's not like walking down the street or driving up in front of the car. So they enter from the rear. Many of these are window smash or glass door smash. They don't even try to open the frames because I believe they think that'll set off alarms. Many people do not have glass break sensors, especially on the second story. And so a high number of these burglaries are second story entries, particularly if there's a balcony attached to the second floor, which I'm sure many of you have. Their pattern continues that once they get inside, they target the master bedroom and master closet almost exclusively. And they're in for just a few minutes generally, rifling through nightstand drawers, in some cases safes that are not locked, and master bedroom closets where they know that people keep their valuables, right? Their jewelry, their watches, cash. Handbags are a popular item. Things that are easy, they're liquid, they're easy to liquidate and turn into cash. So, and then they slip out the back and disappear into the night in these undeveloped areas. So that's that one particular group. And keep in mind that there is a focus on this, and there should be, but our message to the public is don't concern yourself with who is committing the burglary. Concern yourself with protecting your home from any burglary, because people will come through your front door, they'll knock and ask if you've seen their dog, if you're home, it's really just a ploy or something like that, right? I'm selling whatever, Girl Scout cookies, whatever you have. And I shouldn't probably mention Girl Scout. People are gonna think they're criminals, which they're not. We love the Girl Scouts, just for the record. There's many different ploys that they will kind of use a ruse to find out if somebody's home. I have a sneaking suspicion, it's just a working hunch, that the rear yard crew, it could be as simple as whether or not lights are on. We noticed that a lot of the burglaries, including the one that we essentially interrupted, occurred like right now, as soon as it got dark. And criminals generally take the path of least resistance. They're generally not rocket scientists. And so if I'm sitting on a green belt, try to wrap my head around what they might do. If I'm sitting on a green belt, me and a couple of my buddies, and we spread out to where we can each see a couple houses, as soon as like at my home personally, 20, 30 minutes before dark, my lights go on because I'm inside. If that doesn't happen and I'm one of these criminals, I can be pretty sure that nobody's home. Occasionally, one of these burglaries do happen, a window gets smashed and somebody is home. In those cases, these people leave. They don't continue with they don't want to get caught, right? They want to get away undetected. So it's good that we're focused on this and how to protect your home from this particular pattern. But the message is, lock your doors. Keep your garage door closed. And I'm giving you advice that I personally use. My garage is never open unless I'm standing in it, and I live in what I would consider to be a safe area. My doors are always locked, even when I'm inside. It's going to buy me some time to defend myself or my family or escape through the back, whatever I could do. Window film, there's a great product out there. There's a number of manufacturers, window film, that will make it much more difficult to get through a glass door as opposed to it just shattering, the glass falling out. Which is going to cause them time and noise, and those are two things they don't want. So there's, of course, alarm systems, surveillance systems, those all help. These people have hit homes that have alarms and have video, and we have great video of people that we can identify in and out of a house in less time than it takes for the alarm company to notify our dispatch that there's an alarm activation. Of course, inside your home, if somebody does make it inside your home, make sure that they go home with nothing. Buy a safe, and I mean like a real safe. They're expensive, but they're a far less expense than your valuables, your family heirlooms, your documents that can now be used to open credit cards in your name. Get a big one, a heavy one, bolt it to the floor or to the wall so that it can't be taken out. A lot of us, including myself, have smaller safes for particular items. Those things get taken out the window with the burglars. Even if they're locked, they don't care. They figure there might be valuables or jewelry inside. But take these measures to protect yourself, lock your safe. It is inconvenient to have to open a safe every day to put your favorite watch on or your jewelry, but it's a lot less inconvenient than filing a police report and probably never recovering your property or losing something that cannot be replaced. So we would recommend you take all of these measures, as many as you can. I get it, cost is an issue and it should be. But we could all run to your favorite home improvement store this afternoon and get a timer and put a light upstairs and downstairs on a timer so that at least a light comes on before dusk to hopefully deter a percentage of these crimes that are occurring related to this one particular group. I'm sorry, that was a super long answer, but I will try to provide as much information as possible, so I don't mean to ramble.
Yeah, and that was great. Thank you. Really good information. I expect to ask you the same question again for more the tips again.
Can I ask? Can I just give a finer point to that? Just as the Talega example, and building on what Mayor James said. So with our friends, they went to one of those Talega Park concerts. Their house was broken into while they were at the concert. It was recent, and when the wife came home with the kids, they were still inside the home. Right. I say that because that wasn't a forced entry, situation, but it caused a great deal of fear and concern amongst that family for sure, but also all the other families. Right. And so, what that did though was raise the level of vigilance for our community. Right. And their interest in learning other ways to, okay, maybe I should be more aware, even if I go temporarily somewhere. They lived on a green belt. We need to make sure we lock our doors. We need to make some additional protective, measures, raising the awareness that people are going to sort of prey on that situation when they're not home. So just to give that finer point in terms of the mode of entry and what
if I
happened
can
with our
just-
friends.
If I can just jump on that, and unfortunately what occurs is through Nextdoor or Facebook or whatever, people hear about this, and before the whole game of telephone, before you know it, someone's talking about a home invasion. Unless Captain Benfield knows something I don't know, there have been no home invasions. There have been suspects in the house when people have returned, but there have been no forced home invasions, that what you see in the movies of people being held at gunpoint and all. It doesn't mean it's not dangerous. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have a concern, but we have to keep everything in perspective.
If I could jump in, and thank you, and I appreciate, and that's correct, no home invasions. And Mayor Pro Tem Duncan brought up a point that reminds me of something I probably should have said at the last question. I'll throw it out here at the risk of taking up even more time on the same question before we get to the next one. But a very powerful tool is social media. We recognize that. We encourage everybody to use your neighbors as, let's get back 10, 20, 30 years ago when people knew their neighbors. You don't necessarily have to like them, but we should all be cordial. It is a force multiplier when you're away and you're out of town. Again, something that I personally do, we tell our neighbors when we're going to be out of town, it's an extra set of eyes and ears, and they're more alert if they do hear something unusual that might not tip them off on a normal day. They know we're out of town. Now maybe that's a call to police, and I don't have to wait for my alarm company to call and then get dispatched to call a deputy and then wait for a deputy, or in my case, a police officer, to respond to my home, only to find my valuables gone. We encourage you, get to know your neighbors, develop a community partnership within your own streets and neighborhoods, and let's get back into some form, whether it's Nextdoor, San Clemente Life, or traditional neighborhood watch. But that is something that we absolutely have to invest more in as a community to help protect each other. One day you're protecting your neighbor, and the next day they're protecting you and your property. It's a great tool. It's kind of fallen by the wayside in recent years with the popularity of social media. People turn to, you name your app, I would probably say it wrong if I tried, but you name your app, they turn to that for information first, as opposed to actually knowing your neighborhood and what's going on, who's home, who's isn't. Another important option that you should know about is you can call in when you're going to be out of town. You can call us. And that's one of the things that the RSVPs will do, is they will do vacation checks when you're out of town. Now, the RSVPs work during the day, but anytime we get a vacation check that goes to the RSVPs, we also brief that to our night shift and day shift deputies, so they're aware as well. So it's another tool that I think is underutilized. I again, blame the pandemic. During those years, everybody was home. We got out of things, including Neighborhood Watch, but hopefully we can reinvest in that and bring that powerful tool back to the city.
So that was a 20-second question. It took us 14 minutes to get.
Here all night.
So please proceed.
A lot of great tips. There were two robbers taken into custody a few weeks ago. What happens to them?
So I'll do everything in my power to remain apolitical, right, and not dive into any really crazy topics. What happens to them is a really good question, right? Point of clarification, and it probably doesn't matter to anybody, but the correct term is burglars, right? They broke into a home. And the distinction, if you're curious, is, and now you guys are thinking, this is how we talk for 14 minutes on the first question. The distinction is that a robbery is generally a crime against a person, right? And like you think of the classic example, I point a gun at you and steal your wallet, right? That's a robbery. A burglary, as the mayor mentioned, is a crime against property, entry into a structure, to commit grand theft, petty theft, or any other felony. Okay, so that's the distinction. It doesn't really matter, but you'll hear me use terms that you may not use. That's why I'm just used to using our penal code definition. So those burglars were arrested. As mentioned earlier, they are foreign nationals. I do believe that at least one of them, if not both of them, previously deported felons. They're going to get their day in court. They're more than likely, their bail is pretty high. We ask for a bail enhancement because of the flight risk, but there's a potential, they could bail. And that's just part of our justice system. I'm not going to point the fingers at anybody. What happens to them long term, right, is if they're convicted of a crime, they'll be sentenced like anybody else and they'll have to serve their time. The federal government, I'm sure, would love to get their hands on these people, but there are legal restrictions and limitations with what we are and are not allowed to share with our federal partners. And we cannot honor, by law in California, we cannot honor federal holds on people. If it was Anaheim PD that had a warrant for these people, we would not release them. We would call Anaheim PD and they would come and get them. If it's a federal hold from ICE, Immigration, Border Patrol, DHS, anything like that, we're not allowed to communicate that with them. And that's just the reality of where we are today.
Thank you. So turning now over to a couple of vehicle questions.
Just to get on the record, I was at Customs and Border Protection, and we had the holds, and we need to keep the holds. Right? It doesn't make any sense to turn people back out on the street just because they have an immigration issue. We need to keep that continuum going. When they're done with their when they're done with their sentence, they need to be removed back to the home country.
So turning it over to some vehicle questions. Someone received a ticket for parking an RV for more than 5 hours, but there are RVs in other areas of the business park that are not ticketed or towed. Can you speak to when RVs are ticketed and or towed?
Sure. So there is an ordinance in San Clemente that prohibits parking of an RV for more than 5 hours. And we'll all be able to draw up examples of when an RV was parked for more than 5 hours. Just keep in mind that we don't randomly go around the city marking vehicles of any kind. Generally, it's responsive to a call for service. Someone will point out to us, there's an RV parked over here. We'll send a traffic officer, a CSO, or a regular deputy, and they will mark that vehicle and start the clock. However, that's dependent. You'll see it might be 5-6 hours and we're getting a call, hey, it's still there. That's dependent upon calls for service. And oftentimes our parking enforcement crew that may have marked that, now they might be tied up on a traffic collision doing an investigation or handling another problem somewhere else in the city. A significant incident can draw multiple resources at one time, and that's going to delay that response. Sometimes, admittedly, sometimes there's overlap when one shift ends in the middle of that 5 hours, and that might not be conveyed to the next shift. And so they don't realize that, hey, I'm supposed to be going out and checking on this. But generally, once we receive that second call, that would be that kind of stopgap. That would remind the new person when they're going out, they would see that it had been previously marked at what time, and then that would lead to a citation. The citation is the normal process. We would cite. You generally wouldn't tow unless this has happened so many times, or it's been marked and warned and still isn't moving, and then there's an authorization section to tow. But our typical response is going to be cite after 5 hours.
So I see that Captain Benfield's behavioral response team is here, and rather than keep him here for a long time, I would like to get them up here and talk about what they're doing.
Yeah, great. So I'll introduce Deputy Mike Krugel. He, like I said, former San Clemente deputy, did a great job here. He was actually our behavioral health liaison deputy while he was here. Then he was transferred because of his expertise, try to embarrass him, to the Behavioral Health Bureau. But I asked him to come tonight. He's joined by his partner who's a mental health clinician. Is that the right term? Sorry. Okay, yes. just so that they can explain what the Behavioral Health Bureau does. For your knowledge, this is not a San Clemente team. This is a regional team, and they're part of the Southwest Division's Behavioral Health Bureau. So if he could just briefly kind of talk about the model and what their goal is, how they aim to achieve that goal, and then maybe if you want to just quickly advise them about Be Well. I still think that there's a lot of our community that doesn't know what Be Well is.
Of course.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deputy Mike Krugel. So as far as like the, what have we talked about already? I apologize. As far as,
Homeless, just not a whole lot. So
Okay.
we start with you guys, and then if we get specific questions, which I guarantee you we will, then I'll try to field whatever I can.
okay. So as far as the behavioral health team goes, our goal is to try and link people up with resources here in the city, county, and kind of the regional level. So we have programs here in the city and programs as well as the county that try and hook people up with resources, trying to get people housing, trying to get people linked up with, trying to get people linked up with insurance reasons, to try and get them additional resources like for veterans or for people out of state. People trying to get hooked up with housing. I know there was a big question a while back for like with like hotel vouchers and stuff. We don't have that kind of stuff here, but we try and get people hooked up with county resources that do have those kind of like feelers and stuff like that, as far as that goes. But basically, our job as a behavioral health team, we try and talk to those people and try and get them linked to those resources. So that's kind of what we do, is what we try and basically branch out to those county resources that get people the resources that they need. That's kind of what we do.
About the co-responder model.
Yeah, so myself and my clinician back there, Topher, not my clinician, but the clinician that I ride with, Topher, our job, we respond out to mental health emergencies and crises. So our job is basically to assist people that maybe would qualify for hospitalization, and we take people to the hospital for that reason, for people that are deemed danger to the self, danger to others, or gravely disabled. Our model here in the county is responding to those as well as responding to follow-ups. So because we are not a 24-hour team, a lot of the times the field deputies out in patrol already go out and handle those calls without us being present, because we have that ability to do so. And then we follow up with them like a week later or so, a couple days later, and try and see what additional resources that we can provide. So we have people that work with the county that go out to in-home crisis counseling that we as deputies can't offer, but I know healthcare agency can. So their job is to basically link people up with those additional resources after they've been let out from the hospital, that they've been deemed stabilized.
And then can you talk about like the size of your team, how your structure's set up, and then maybe the liaisons in the cities, how many of those we have, just to kind of give an overall picture?
Yeah, so for the Behavioral Health Bureau in total, people that work directly with the behavioral health team, it's probably 13 or so people, 12 people, something like that. So we're a very small unit, hopefully getting more funding sooner rather than later, to expand that team. And then on top of that, below us, we would have, I don't want to say below, but like on top of that, we have the city behavioral health liaisons, people that work directly with the city, that are patrol trained in the city, and that have very, which was my position here, have very close ties to the city, and basically are able to pinpoint different hotspots or different areas from the city that they can now go out and try and provide those resources and try and get people linked up to those. So as far as number of BHLs, I couldn't really pinpoint. I would say at least 13 additional, at least one in each contract city that the Orange County Sheriff's Department contracts with. But it's hard to say exactly if everyone has one for sure. I know we have one here in San Clemente, and I know we have one in San Juan and one in Dana Point as well, or at least two in Dana Point. But yeah, that's kind of our model. We basically try and, since we can't be everywhere at one time, we try and contract out with the cities that basically now they have an additional person that now has the same training and expertise as us, that can go out to the city and specifically and try and help out with resource giving and stuff.
Okay, and then just to kind of add on that, the behavioral health model is kind of, it's a co-responder model, right? So it's outreach and enforcement, and it's, the teams are law enforcement officers coupled with mental health clinicians, and you guys work with OC Health and any other groups attached to that, the PERT or?
Yes, so OC Healthcare Agency is one of our biggest partners that we contract with, because without them, it's really hard to get people these resources, whether it be hospitalization, whether it be housing, whether it be food or shelter and stuff like that. So it definitely helps us with Healthcare Agency having those resource partners. But yeah, I know we talked about, I know I didn't talk about Be Well, and I apologize. So Be Well is it's a organization. Maybe I can defer that my clinician. He's probably a better person to talk about Be Well. I apologize. But it is a county contract. If you want to come up here, Topher, or this is my clinician, the clinician Topher. But if you want to talk about Be Well.
Hi. So Be Well is part of an Exodus program in the county. So we've opened what we call CSUs, which are crisis stabilization units throughout the county. That's where we can bring people who are experiencing a mental health crisis that we believe can be resolved within the next 24 to 72 hours. So we have 3 of them operating currently. Be Well is one of the newest, and they're planning another one, I believe, in Irvine that's going to be a lot larger. So a lot of our patients are trying to avoid bringing people to hospital emergency rooms, where we start backing up emergency rooms and bringing our clients to places where they're not going to receive the services that they actually need. So if they go to somewhere like Be Well, they can actually get linkage services, they get to talk to a therapist right away, they can provide medication, and they can address like any sort of minor medical conditions that might be happening. That particular campus also has a detox center and a sobering station. So if we're dealing with, there's a lot of like comorbidity with diagnoses. So we have a lot of people that have mental illness and might be treating that themselves with drugs, or alcohol, something like that. So we can sort of address both of those issues at one facility. So that's the CSU Crisis Stabilization Unit. And then above that, they have what they call a CRP, which is a Crisis Residential Program. So if within those 24 to 72 hours, they determine that this person needs additional stabilization and they're voluntarily willing to do it, they can go upstairs to a program which lasts anywhere from 14 to 30 days. So there's additional treatment, groups, therapy sessions, things like that. And then they can get linked to outside resources from there as well. So that's how Be Well's.
That's a question about Be Well. When you initial contact, is that always 5150s?
No. So Be Well takes voluntary as well. So if someone calls and says, hey, I need some help, or even going to the sobering station, they can do that on a voluntary basis. So all of our CSUs take voluntary as well as 5150 clients.
And let me just introduce Senator Pat Bates is just walking in. Thank you, Pat.
And Mayor, we have some questions related to homelessness, if
Sure,
we
let's
have
go.
time. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
If you guys want to stay up there, we might have some questions for you. Okay.
Yeah, if questions come up, we can try and help.
Okay.
You got a voice, you'll project.
The first one is in relation to homelessness and those that may be also mentally ill. What are we doing to protect a citizen from being harmed by someone who's homeless and or mentally ill?
Yeah, a little almost predictive policing here. So there's some difficulties that I think it's important to convey. It's something that I talk about a lot with kind of individual members. I'm sure people on the council have heard it before, but we don't anticipate crime, and we can try based on predictive models, right? If we believe burglaries are about to occur in a certain area, we can deploy resources to try to prevent that. But we cannot engage with someone based on what they may be capable of. And I do hear that a lot. This person could do this person, not what they're currently doing, it's that they could do that, right? That's not a parameter that we have really any authority to engage in, much like moving people, and the comments have been made already tonight, right, about how do we get these people out of our town. I've said since before I actually got here, I did an interview with the San Clemente Times, Jaden, saw you back there, where I mentioned a couple things. Homelessness in and of itself is not a crime, and that our goal is, of course, a blend of outreach and enforcement, right? And we do both. But if somebody is in fear for their safety and they have a reason to be, of course, we'll send a deputy whether or not a crime has been occurred. That's part of what they do is investigate. The homeless, they have the same rights as everybody else, the same state and U.S. constitutional rights. A public place is open to the public, including the homeless. I get the health and safety concerns related to homeless, okay? But that doesn't give me any authority to tell someone that they have to leave a public place or to, quote, move them along, which I've been asked directly from community members. I get it that in some cases they just don't want to see them. And so we can, try to enforce where we can, and we can try to create regulation that outlaws what they're doing or where they currently are. But that's whack-a-mole, for lack of a better term. We are moving them from one spot to another, and it might be your problem in this area of the town, and we go down and we enforce, we do what we can, and they move to another part of town, and now we're doing the same thing. There is no removal ability or authority unless someone is a law violator that can result in physical arrest and transport to the jail, or 5150 as they were describing. And we do all of those things. We cite, we give warnings, we make arrests. There are people with warrants out there and that commit new crimes, and so we engage appropriately with them. The community, I can't tell someone when to or when not to be fearful. And I understand that everybody has their own kind of baseline or gauge that they use. But homelessness in and of itself is not a violation. It's not enforceable. We can't take action. And we lack, I'm not talking San Clemente Police Services, I'm talking law enforcement across the board, lacks any authority to ask someone to leave a public place. And that includes beaches, parks, playgrounds, sidewalks, unless they're blocking the sidewalks, right? At all of these locations I've mentioned, there may be specific regulations where if you do something there or based on the hour of the day where we might be able to do some enforcement. But generally speaking, the complaints that we get daily, if you boil down they might be doing this, they might be doing that, it's really, I don't want to see them, can you move them along? We just don't have the authority to do that. It's unconstitutional for me to go up to Adam, I'm sorry, he's sitting right in front of me, and just say, hey, Adam, you can't be on this street, hit the road, pal.
Well,
He wouldn't have to, and I wouldn't be able to do it. So we do have, sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt you. We do have capabilities with regards to enforcing the law and trying to calm people's fears, but we also have limitations that are founded in law.
Yeah, I just want to comment on that theme. Homelessness is not a crime to be homeless, but we're not talking about a person who's simply homeless. We're talking about setting up home on a public street, a public sidewalk, blocking parking spaces, blocking bicycle racks. I can't set up my kitchen, I set up a Coleman stove and furniture in the street anywhere. I can't do it at a public park. I can't do it at the state beach. I can't do that anywhere. So there's room for compassion, but at the same time, we're not talking about someone who's simply homeless looking for help at Be Well or other organizations. We're talking about people that set up camps. And when you set up one and it stays, then it's easy for the next guy to say, I'm going to set up my camp next by, so there'll be a couple of us. And then it looks like driving by Los Angeles, where you have rows and rows and blocks. That's what we want to avoid. And there's a momentum to the issue here. And I see the momentum beginning. It's troublesome. And I know, Captain Benfield, you have limitations, but at the same time, you may say move along, but you can also say take your furniture off of a public street, and it just can't be there.
If there is a citizen that's concerned about an encampment, who do they call, and how long might the process take to remove that encampment?
So it depends on jurisdiction, right? If it's within city limits, then it would fall on us. They could call us. And for encampment purposes, if it were state parks, we've had that before, right? South, Christianito, south of the city, that's outside our purview. But the appropriate enforcement agency, whether that's Caltrans, CHP, state parks, they would be your avenue to go and pursue, because there are requirements with posting and noticing when it comes to before we can clean up an encampment. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And we've worked pretty hard on this, and I will say that, well, you can call the sheriff, or you can call code enforcement too about it. San Clemente has, first off, there is this context of constitutional mandates in the Ninth Circuit, and I'm just the messenger, not the Ninth Circuit. They are very attentive to the rights of homeless people. We just have to get that out. And there's a very active advocacy bar in Orange County and LA County that have laid out cities in our county for millions and millions of dollars, but not us. They've never done that. The sheriff is obligated to enforce city ordinances as long as they're constitutional. And if they get laid out or sued or pay damages because of something we ask them to enforce, they can turn to us and ask us to cover that tab. So I'm just saying that, not to rain on the parade, but just to give that context. With all that said, San Clemente's regulations are very aggressive when it comes to leaving personal property around and when it comes to having an encampment. If you have it, you're allowed, as of 2 weeks ago, the Ninth Circuit invalidated the city of Grants Pass, Oregon, invalidated their homeless ordinance. Our ordinance satisfies that test, I'm happy to say. As recommendations have come from the Public Safety Committee, the council's asked us to look at them. One of their recommendations became the basis for settling a lawsuit over personal property. Good for you, good for us in avoiding that. But you cannot leave a tent up in a public place after dawn. You're allowed to sleep there. You're allowed to be cold and to warm yourself if you're without housing in the city. But you can't leave an encampment up. It can't block an entrance or exit to a public facility. It can't be you can't have a fire in a high fire hazard area, which is a big, big part of our jurisdiction in San Clemente. No open space, public or private, can host an encampment. You have a right to fall asleep and to warm yourself, as the lieutenant said. But some of the things, Councilmember Noblock, that you've mentioned are illegal in our jurisdiction. And so if there's any doubt, calling code enforcement, who will consult with us, elevate it to the sheriff if need be, is something you ought to do. But at the end of the day, you are allowed to be without shelter and to warm yourself in a public place. You can do that here, but you can't have a tent city in San Clemente. Your ordinances don't allow it, and your council has required enforcement of those ordinances.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask?
Please, go ahead.
Some clarity from Scott on, in the Ninth District, what everybody's talking about is the Martin versus Boise case. I recommend everybody go and Google it and read it. And that's the case that came out. It was a single father was coming to visit his kids in Boise. He couldn't afford a hotel room, so he slept in the park, started getting cited for it, ultimately arrested for it, and they sued. And the Ninth District said, basically, if you can't supply a shelter for somebody in your city, they can sleep on public property. Now, that was a very narrow, it seemed like, ruling. A single father, he wasn't setting up tents, he wasn't camping, he wasn't blocking the sidewalk, he was sleeping overnight. Somehow that has been expanded to where basically you can't talk to a homeless person no matter what they do. If they've got stuff on the sidewalk, they got, their benches set up, that you can't do anything. And maybe this was the Grants Pass decision, I'm not sure, but several, and this is covering 8 states, by the way. Only 8 states out of the 50, we're the ones that are dealing with this. If you want to check and see what the Ninth District covers and you don't want this, then you just keep on moving east. But anyway, that's the way it is now. And there's several municipalities that were trying to figure this out and coming up with ordinances as well. You can sleep on public property, but only from 10 o'clock till 8 o'clock in the morning. And is this one of the cases that was just overturned by the Ninth District? Because that seems reasonable. You can sleep, but you can't live. Is that one of the cases?
You can have, again, our ordinance is written very, very closely to those decisions, because we don't want to be the test case, but we don't want to wimp out either. And so what our ordinance does is distinguishes between essential personal property. That's to keep your body warm and maybe brush your teeth, and just your household. Essential personal property can be left. It only takes 24 hours for the city to notice somebody that is in the wrong place and need to move it. But all the other accoutrements and your chop shop and your bikes, and you can't leave that in a public place in San Clemente. And we're confident that those personal property regulations will hold here.
I think, Scott, here's the problem. I think we see it every day. And I think it's one of the things that, as a city, we need to redouble our efforts. I will tell you right now, and I'll tell the audience right now, I get probably 5 or 6 calls a day on that sort of thing. And my issue is, as the mayor, my issue is I shouldn't have to be taking those calls. Citizens shouldn't have to be identifying this. I think we need a more active code enforcement, more active park rangers, and they need to be out there doing their job.
And I just would like to thank the city council for the second outreach worker. He started last week, and so we now have 2 community outreach workers. A question that follows along with that is, could a citizen call the behavioral health unit if they see someone who's mentally ill or maybe addicted to drugs? What is the proper course?
Yes and no, Mike. I don't think you guys get calls directly from people. I think they're generally referred from our local units. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a phone number that people can call, but it's kind of distributed back out to the city. So
Right.
if we get a call that's handled by one of our 13 contractors, San Antonio being one of them, we give it to that behavioral health liaison to let them know, like, hey, you were saying that there's someone camping here or someone who is here, you need to get assistance. So we would let them know. Additional resources, we can come out and help that. We've done, we've assisted the deputies here. I know I called in for behavioral health here when I was here, to come down and try and help offer resources, try and get homeless encampments cleaned up, and try and get those, encampments cleaned up and try and get those resources. So yeah, they can call us, but we distribute that to the city.
It's kind of all one team.
And then also, I would like to also say that not only do we also help out with that, if we need additional people, we actually call in like the county resources, like outreach and engagement. And if you, are you guys familiar with OC Navigator? OC Navigator. So you can put in where you're having problems, what you're having a problem with, and it'll direct you to the right phone to call. Us being one of them, or this proper city or whatever. You actually use like a search bar.
Jennifer, if I could just add and just piggyback on this. This is really different than the approach in many other Orange County jurisdictions, especially north of the 55, especially that have come under the auspices of the federal court up there. We were able to disqualify that judge. The city council learned that to operate an overnight shelter would cost $1 million in startup and $1 million a year, and decided instead to allocate resources to the intervention and the more causal problems of the condition than just band-aiding it with an overnight, and very expensive overnight accommodation, where then tomorrow the same problem starts up. So your council has been skillful and committed to these efforts as opposed to a Band-Aid, which would be a city shelter.
And does San Clemente have the same number of behavioral health unit resources that other cities do? Or do some cities have more resources for behavioral health? Yeah, do other cities have more behavioral health resources than San Clemente?
As far as South County?
Committed to San Clemente.
That was my question, and that's not what I wrote. I quoted him, and you said Dana Point has 2. I was just wondering.
Can we have the microphone on the?
That's,
They actually have a different, helps out with everything. It's not just, homeless or anything like that. Just like, how only a favorite home, they don't have a.
so Michelle, grab the mic, and what is your
So
question?
she wrote, does Dana Point have 2 and we have 1?
I said why, so I have 3 questions.
She can ask her own question.
I said, why does Dana Point have 2 and San Clemente only has 1? I said that when you were
Use the
there.
mic, Michelle.
Oh, sorry, this?
Now turn it on. Closer.
Oh. Thanks, guys. I don't like microphones. I just asked because you said up there that Dana Point has 2 of you guys. You called them like something HL.
They don't actually have a
And I was-
health liaison like San Clemente does. They actually have a team that deals with a lot of problems. It's like
Okay.
everything. I forget what the.
It's called a CSU. It's similar to
And
our
we do
trip
not
group.
have that?
It's like a crime suppression, but it's basically the
Okay.
It's not specific to behavioral health.
Okay. Thank you. So then my third question was, I was wondering if you proactively, your team drives around looking for people in crisis, or if you rely on, say, residents passing by to then alert you, and then the next day somebody comes out.
So the way our team works as in the PERT team, so we are the psychiatric emergency response team. So we go by PERT for short. But our job is basically get a call from a particular city.
Right.
We will respond out.
I'll get you there in just a moment.
Sure. However, I'm sorry, also, we also do a follow-up model. So we also respond to 13 contract cities where there has been a hospitalization in the last week. So we try and get them when they come out of the hospital and try and help out.
Well, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, so, Mr. Loeffler, you have something you want to discuss?
Yeah, I wanted to circle back real quick. We got off the topic about vehicles, RVs parking overnight, and circling back to that, we heard about the 5-hour, but I know we have a city ordinance in town that you can't park an RV and camp in it overnight. And I've heard different reasons why, and one of them was that we consider that RVs are covered under Martin versus Boise. And that's confusing to me, since you're not unsheltered when you're sleeping in a camper. So is that in fact the reason that we're not enforcing that? And if not, exactly why aren't we? Now, for Scott on the Martin versus Boise part of it first, is that coming from the city?
I don't know what the latest and greatest is. On the RVs, I'm not sure what the latest and greatest is, thinking about where they stand with enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, Martin versus Boise doesn't articulate or describe in specificity every potential circumstance, all right? It dealt with a single case. But the broadly accepted interpretation by the courts and by judges here in Orange County cover two things in general. Camping, right? Camping ordinances and loitering. So the policy of the sheriff and many other agencies is that we will not welcome this litigation by enforcing camping and or loitering laws if there's no housing opportunity, if there's no shelter for them to be taken to. And that doesn't matter if you're in a car or not. And San Clemente has a you can't sleep in your car. We used to have one back in Lake Forest when I was on patrol. Other than that, it would not be an illegal act, right? That's why we refer to the 5-hour parking, because that is something we can enforce. It doesn't matter if you're living in it or sleeping in it or not. But you're starting to split hairs and get into the gray area with this interpretation of Martin versus Boise, because I believe the courts are going to say it doesn't matter if it's a tent or a car or a tarp. If they have nowhere else to be, why are you arresting them for sleeping, for a necessary function of life? And so that's kind of a slippery slope, and I think that's why the sheriff's taken a stance on it that, hey, we'll enforce other laws as applicable, but we won't enforce camping or loitering as it relates to homeless people unless or until you have a shelter option available. And I know that that idea is wildly unpopular in this town, and that's okay. I'm not here to really comment on whether you should or shouldn't. But that is a tool that we currently don't have. We don't have that option, and so what you see with homeless people in public is what you are going to see 5 years from now. It's what you saw 5 years ago. That's a tool for enforcement that would allow us then to enforce these camping violations that are considered status crimes. We currently cannot, that's not an option to us. We can't enforce them. If there's a housing option, whether it's here or regional or whatever in the South Spa, now it gives us an opportunity to offer those beds to the homeless, and when they don't accept them, now you can enforce the camping violation because they're turning it down. It's available to them and they're turning it down, so now it can be, you can criminalize these status crimes again.
Hey, Chief, just, going back to the RVs, what if they're not homeless? What if they're just passing through and setting up a camp? They're just parking on the street and they're going to stay here. They're not homeless. They will tell you they're not homeless. So why can't we enforce the overnight parking then?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the, I've heard the community talk about this exact thing, but that's when we would rely back on the 5-hour parking regulation. Because again, if they're not homeless, status crimes don't apply to them anyways. They're just, you are allowed, any of you are allowed to go park in your car on any public street. And who's to say when you're taking a break from work or catching an hour's rest versus sleeping there overnight? That's something we simply can't monitor day in and day out citywide. That's just an impossibility. But the recommendation to the public is if you see something that you think is suspicious, or you see something that you think is potentially a violation of law, whether it's an ordinance or not, call us, and that's what we do. We'll send a deputy out to investigate. And in some cases, again, we won't be able to ask that person to leave, but there might be other enforceable action there that we can take.
So Captain Benfield mentioned the term SPA. SPA is service planning areas. And Scott, you want to get into that settlement? I think you're better suited to talk about it than me.
Yeah, well, I alluded to it earlier. The North County cities and the city of Laguna Beach entered into a settlement with homeless advocates. Housing is a Human Rights of Orange County is the main advocate, under which they agreed to provide perpetually in each SPA the number of beds equal to the point in time count, which is the number of homeless people found on a particular January morning every year. So what they agreed to do was to construct, jointly fund in those spas and to operate at significant expense shelters in those areas. So they have, so to speak, a coupon every time they encounter somebody sleeping on the sidewalk in those areas. This council has opted not to do that. If there's a bed available, there are a lot of private beds available to unhoused people in our community. If the city makes the deputy in the street aware of that opportunity, if the city's willing to voucher that in a local hotel or something, then that person can be subject to the arrest. And the plaintiffs in those cases have agreed that we can do that on an encounter-by-encounter basis, but it requires time, effort, significant expense on the city's part to be able to do that. I think rather than doing that and rather than having that opportunity, this council opted to do wraparound services and try to take people off the street as opposed forever, as you've heard, as opposed to just doing it one night at a time.
And I'd like to just make a couple points, and I'll be as succinct as I can here. So they opened up the shelters in all those cities up in North County, and their homeless population increased.
And they got sued for the conditions of the
So
shelter.
that obviously isn't the right option. Our option has actually worked pretty well. Carly has done a great job, so well that we're getting another one, and she's moving people out. But I don't think it makes sense for every single city to try to tackle this problem on their own, especially a city like ours where people are coming to the city from somewhere else because they like the conditions. So I think the county should be primarily responsible. They have the health services. And, we talked about this before, but if at the Be Well facility, which is in Irvine, which is in the South County Spa area, if the county operated some kind of facility, I'd like to see that open up. Then we could empower the deputies to have a place for people to go in South County, not in some poor city which volunteered to be the place where the shelter is, but on county land, which is where that Be Well facility is. So I think that may help us with the enforcement options we want to give our deputies, right? Because that's kind of the missing link here. The other point I want to make on the RVs is important, and I got to meet with Adam and discuss this. There is a distinction between the public parking and the private parking, right? We see a lot of pictures and they're in the private parking lots. That is the responsibility of those private land owners primarily, right? And so just to clarify that's different than the city property, and the enforcement options are different. What they have, though, is zoning that doesn't allow people to sleep in those public parking lots at the shopping centers, right? And so we want to empower those the operators of the shopping centers to take aggressive position, to call the sheriff's department and say, hey, these people are parking longer than our requirements. So they have their own private 5-hour parking at those locations, and they don't want to be out of zoning compliance, right? They don't want to have people sleeping in a commercial area. They're not allowed to have that. Their own use permits are affected by that. So we want to make sure we have that good relationship with those private businesses so that they will alert us when people are doing things on their own property that don't comport with the zoning they have. But just to make that point is that's their primary responsibility, right? Because it's on their own private land.
So I recently had a meeting with Sheriff Barnes, DA Spitzer, Captain Benfield was there, County Council was there, and Sheriff Barnes, and Tony, correct me if I'm wrong, but County Council, Sheriff Barnes and County Council simply are not going to come off of their opinion that we're not going to get full enforcement of our camping loitering ordinances until we have a homeless shelter.
Shelter access.
Shelter, well, a shelter access, that's, yeah. But Sheriff Barnes was suggesting we put one in San Clemente. That's simply not going to occur. You know, we looked, all you have to do is look back 3 years ago when we had the lot. And what happened when you know, it's like the Kevin Costner movie, Fields of Dreams. You build it and they will come, and they did come. And we had 99 vagrants and bums living on a city lot. We simply cannot do that again. And to the Mayor Pro Tem's point, those cities that did build shelters, their homeless population increased. And we're, you know, so I'm going to take a hard line that I won't even, you know, I know there are crazies out there, the advocates for vagrants, you know, but and they're running for city council, and God bless them. But I'm simply not going to come off of the fact that no homeless shelter in San Clemente, period.
If I could just try to jump in here real quick, and I'm not taking a position, trust me, and just believe me when I say that I'm on your side regardless of your position, right? My job is to service the needs of this community, as actually is all of our jobs. And so I'm not leaning either way on this. I'll support whatever the city wants to do. But it is my job to make sure that you guys have accurate information. And with that, I would encourage you all to go to the county's Everyone Counts, the point in time count that compared 2019 to 2022, because what you'll find is some cities with homeless had a significant reduction, to include Huntington Beach. San Clemente had a reduction, but other cities with homeless shelters saw an increase. Case in point, Costa Mesa and Newport Beach jointly funded a shelter together. Costa Mesa's numbers went down, Newport's went up. This is the nature of homelessness. That's why they refer to them as transients. It comes and goes. And I know point in time is just a snapshot of that particular day. But I'm happy that even though ours went down by 15 between 2019 and 2022, not a huge number, they certainly weren't stagnant and they weren't trending up. So again, with perception that homelessness is worse now than it's ever been, it is actually, according to the data, a little bit better than it was in 2019 prior to the pandemic. And so the message is really just do the research, the data's, plus this survey, if you haven't seen it, I recommend you go to it. It breaks it down by age, by gender. It talks about the percentages with substance abuse, with mental health abuse. It's really good information that can just empower you with knowledge, whether you currently think this way or not. You may find it informative. So I would just say, take a look at it yourself and draw your own conclusions. Sir, I'm sorry.
Just make one comment on that. The statistic to me seems skewed because, forgive me the year, I'm not certain when it was, but when they cleared out Santa Ana riverbed, that homeless population.
Eric, take the mic.
Oh, that's okay.
You good?
From that point forward, it has exploded.
They can't hear you back there.
Sorry, thank you. That statistic seems skewed to me because whenever they cleared out Santa Ana riverbed, the homeless population has exploded and it hasn't gone down since. And I believe that was 2019, was it not?
It was
18?
Prior.
So I think if we took the data from 2016 to compared it to 2019 or 2016 to 21, those statistics would be severely
And you're
altered.
kind of making my point. The everyone counts point in time comparison. This has been done for a handful of years now. Every other year, the pandemic messed that up, so they didn't do it in 21, which is when they would have done it. They did it then in 22. But you should be able to go back and check previous years, assuming it had been in effect prior to 19, right? Which I'm not really sure, but I know the riverbed was well underway in 2017, and part of that removal process dealing with the judge and trying to get that cleaned up.
You know, there was one other thing that was brought up, and that was the county property in Irvine. So I had a discussion at the same meeting that Captain Benfield and I were at. there was a discussion with Supervisor Bartlett, and she said, well, that's not in the fifth supervisory district, so we're going to have a hard time convincing Supervisor Wagner to allow one to be there. So we're going to have some internal conflict within the Board of Supervisors on how to handle that. But I think there's a candidate here tonight for supervisor that's going to fix all that for us, because she's the best friend this city has ever had.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have, ladies and gentlemen, we have 40 questions?
About 40 questions left, so maybe I could
Let's-
get one response.
So this is going to be speed
I was
dating.
trying to do that. We got a little off the group, so let's try this. Can we work with cities, counties, and the state to find a way to amend the law to handle the service resistance and those who are not capable of seeking their own services, such as those with schizophrenia?
That's going to be yours.
Yeah, we alluded to that a little bit earlier. A service-resistant person, unless they're 5150, has a right to be in a public place and be service-resistant. And so there's really nothing to do to distinguish between somebody like that, who's not a danger to themselves and others.
Well,
It is.
There's an extension on that, though. There
Please.
was an assembly bill that Newsom signed just recently that, well, instead of the 72-hour and kick them loose, there will, if you're mentally ill, and they list a bunch of, bipolar, schizophrenic, whatever, if you suffer from those, no, we don't have a place to put them yet, but they can be compelled to stay 1 year for treatment, which is an amazing thing. It's the first time we've
Been
actually.
a lowering of the bar.
Yeah, exactly.
It's called the care court, so you get a guardian assigned by the court that will make those decisions for the severely mentally ill person. So I think that is a step forward. Yeah.
And
I think it's grossly underfunded, though.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's true.
the,
That actually was my question. My
Yeah.
main concern is schizophrenic walking around here. I have family members who suffer from that illness, and I really struggle myself when I see that on the street. And so I know that they do well checks for them, and to make sure that they can take care of themselves. And so there's that fine line.
Yeah, the question was about right, amending the law to be able to help them. We have severely mentally ill people in the community, but I think it's more humane to bring them into a system and give them shelter and a place where there can be treatment provided than to let them out alone. And I think that's what the care court does. Some of them are not going to make that decision themselves, and they're not competent to make that decision. So there's the court that comes in with a guardian who's appointed to make those decisions for them, that understands the conditions. I do think, though, the more humane thing and the better thing for the community is to get them off the street and into some kind of facility. Funding it, different issue, but we're not talking about that today. We're just talking about, is there a plan to do that? There is, and I think it's a good plan.
well,
We read the questions and.
Yeah, let's go on.
why are cars with expired tags sitting on city streets and not towed?
Captain Benfield.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. A car with expired tags can only be towed if it's expired more than 6 months. That's the answer. It could get a citation if it is in fact expired. Keep in mind, many people, including sometimes in my own household, it is currently registered. The tab is like on the kitchen counter and not on the plate where it should be. That is still a citable offense, but it's not something that's going to remove the vehicle. If you see a car with expired tags, please call. We will go out. If it is actually expired or the tab is not affixed, it'll get a citation.
OCSD does tow cars with expired
Next
tabs over
question.
6 months.
Next question.
Why are there not more proactive sweeps in North Beach and the business park?
Yeah, so there are. So everything is, right, we don't have a dedicated beach team. So everything is dependent upon calls for service, but we do sweeps throughout North Beach. In fact, our in-town behavioral health liaison, to answer one of the questions that went back there, I think it was Michelle's, the Behavioral Health Bureau may not come into San Clemente very often and do their own roving patrol, but that's what our behavioral health deputy does every single day. That's his whole job. And you will routinely see him down at North Beach both day and night. In fact, I know he was on the beach last night dealing with some empty tents. So we do them. I know that you may or may not see them. I'm sure there's people in this room that have seen them. And that's how it works. But we have one person assigned to that full time. In the evening, as calls permit, our sergeants will send the entire deputies down there to go and do beach sweeps on occasion. But admittedly, it's not something that we're doing every single night.
Next question.
Why don't we ticket for public urination and defecation?
I'm going to leave my mic on. So those crimes have to be witnessed. If one of you witnesses that offense, that and maybe additional crimes, you can sign, and we'll be happy to come down and cite and/or arrest that person. However, these misdemeanor offenses, they have to be committed in the officer's presence for us to make the arrest. I can go up next to somebody. It's like proving things in court, right? It's going to be eventually in front of a judge. I have to have proof and evidence that that person did that, and them sitting right next to it won't always do it. So I get the community's frustration. I get the health concerns with that. It's a little bit tricky to enforce, but if you see it, call us. Please be willing to sign. Otherwise, we cannot enforce.
Does a photo suffice?
Cameras down at the beach. Like if you see somebody defecate at the beach, I know that you guys have cameras down there because I have a homeless guy chasing me.
Yeah, if there's video evidence, then obviously that can be used to assist with the prosecution. It would just be a matter of can we clearly identify that person from the video? And sometimes, especially if we're referring to our homeless population, they're wearing the same thing, they're in generally the same area. Those shouldn't be too hard to track down.
Why does the city give FAM reduced rent when it's reported that they bring in homeless?
So, FAM, and I think there's going to be a difference of opinion, the council members here, I have a high level of frustration with FAM. I think they are an attractive nuisance for the vagrant population. I think we have a lot more vagrants in our city because of FAM. And there's not a day that you can stand out here in this parking lot and not see vagrants with bags of food that they're there taking out into the open areas, our open space, and cooking. Additionally, a lot of them use FAM as their address. When they're released from jail, they use FAM as their address. It brings a lot of vagrants to our city. City Council voted 3-2, I was in the minority, on extending their lease. I wasn't in favor of extending their lease. We extended their lease and gave them about 50% below market rate for their rent. I think they're a problem in this town. I think they do good work as it relates to family. If they would just stick with family assistant ministries, I'd be fine with them. But they create a lot of problems. And I'm sure my other two council members up here have a different opinion.
Do we need more park rangers and code?
I want to give them an opportunity to respond.
Yeah, I don't need to respond to that.
Well, you voted for it.
I have no reason to respond to it. They do great work for families, as you said.
We want to know why, because why did you not, when you renewed their lease, why did you not make that a condition of the renewal of their lease?
The criminals can't use an address.
My husband asked some city council members, people that are running for city council, the exact same question when we met with them. He's a retired Long Beach cop. So I'd like to know an answer to that.
Okay, next question.
Do we need more park rangers and
Sorry.
code compliance officers to write tickets to free up OCSD?
Yes.
Yes, I think that's a great question, and that's something we should look at.
Yeah, let's get them more funding and hire more code compliance and park rangers.
Sorry, this one's long. Could we direct park rangers or OCSD to where people are sleeping on the beach, even when it's closed? Why is this not a priority?
Yes, if the beach is closed, park rangers more than likely will not be working. They don't work 24 hours a day. Deputies do, so if you see somebody in violation of any code or ordinance or law, please call us and we'll send somebody. Priority is an interesting word. I'm trying to talk fast and be succinct so that we can get through all the calls. But all of our calls for service are based on priority. And when we talk about the number one call, that's immediate threat to life or property. Those are always going to get top billing. Nuisance crimes, as serious as we take them, they fall pretty far down on the list when people are getting things stolen, they're getting attacked or assaulted, or they're in fear for their safety. Our resources are going to get tied up on those calls first, which is why you'll see your quote-unquote lower priority calls have a longer response time because deputies are busy on higher priority matters. Don't misread into that. We understand everything's a priority, but there is a pecking order, and that's kind of the answer to the priority system. It's important to us, but there may be more significant criminal issues occurring that we have to address first.
Next question.
Is there a way that we can get daily enforcement of tents being open or tents being out? Is there a way that we can get daily enforcement of city code, such as tents out in public?
I think Mr. Tamian needs to answer that question. Will you give him a mic?
You can have mine if you'd like, Ann.
Thank you.
I think it's, you got to talk into it.
That's all I have to do?
It doesn't,
Is it on?
It doesn't talk on its own.
It looks like it's on and I'm speaking right into it.
Here, then use this one.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, good evening, folks. So the tents, the regulation to require that tents remain open on two sides is applicable in the city's parks and not public streets or the beach. So if there are parks where people are observing tents that are open on, or that are not open, please give code compliance or the park rangers a call, and we'd be happy to address that.
Thank you. Next question.
Why are criminals not being stopped by OCSD, such as bike thieves?
I'm sorry, such as bike thieves?
Correct.
So criminals are being stopped by OCSD. I don't really understand the question. We respond to calls for service and arrest when necessary. We do proactive enforcement. We arrest a good number of people in this city for all crimes. Bike thieves can be incredibly difficult to prove. And another message to the community, what's something I've said many times before, is please record your bike serial number. Almost no one does. And then when it gets stolen, we cannot definitively prove that it's your bicycle. That number is just like a license plate, and it can be traced back to you. And then when we find it, even if it's long down the road, it's in the system as stolen. That person can be arrested for possession of stolen property, and we can maybe get you your bike back. But that's a big must for us, and it's just something we as consumers are not in the habit of doing. I'd recommend when you buy something new, whether it's a bike, a TV, anything that you'd like to get back if it gets stolen, take a photo of it and take a photo of the serial number. That's it. And then just keep it in case something ever happens. We take that information, we have an accurate description, plus a tracking number that we can use to link that back to you.
Not to go on a slightly different tangent, but the issue with e-bike safety, sort of related to this, a lot of the e-bikes that people complain about are not e-bikes. They're those Surron, basically dirt bikes that are electric instead of gas powered. They are stopping people and they are taking those bikes because they're not legal to be ridden in town. So that, am I right? I'm right, Captain Menfield, right? You've made real progress.
That's correct, and they are wildly expensive, so please do your research if you're going to buy one for anyone in your family to make sure that it doesn't get taken by the police. They're not illegal anywhere in this city. They're essentially...
No, you.
Yeah, you can't ride any kind of, you can't ride an e-bike. Remember, these Surrons are not e-bikes. They don't even have pedals. They're dirt bikes. So that's what I was talking about. They're motorcycles. You should have to get a license and to be able to operate them, but they themselves aren't allowed in town.
Okay.
Yeah, e-bikes are not allowed on the beach trail of any kind.
Why isn't BPR enforcing park permit agreements that state they would reduce overlap of games to allow adequate time between certain players leaving the games to vacate for other players coming in?
We don't have anyone from BPR to respond to that this evening. Next question.
Why does BPR reportedly not comply with the city's master plan, which states that BPR would consider the impacts of facilities on surrounding uses?
We don't have a response to that.
Why are criminals that are released allowed to use FAM as their address?
That's a wonderful question, and I believe acting interim city manager Cecilia
Gallardo Daly.
She's back there? Yes.
She's going.
I believe you had a conversation with FAM on that issue this week?
I did. Thank you, Mayor. I did meet with the Chief Executive Officer of FAM, who stated that they had previously allowed anyone coming to FAM for case management and services to utilize their address where they would hold their mail. They could get packages. But my understanding from Ms. Andrade is that they no longer allow people to utilize FAM as their address when they're doing intake. So to the extent that someone gives FAM's address when they're arrested, they can't stop someone from doing that, but they no longer allow it. And if it's still occurring, it's a practice from a previous model that they utilized.
Hey, Chief, am I wrong, but can't intake and outtake, can't they flag addresses as being not available to use?
There's really no requirement. People could give us any address or no address. They don't have to list it. It's different if you're going to be released on parole or probation, where your agent, you have to give an actual address. Leaving the county jail is not like that. You can say whatever you want, or you could say I'm transient. And actually, a lot of people say I'm transient, so we don't have a record of address to track them back to.
This question starts off with a thank you for your service. Thank you, panelists. How can someone get more guidance regarding neighborhood watch program, and can they ask for additional, more frequent patrols?
Mr. Lofer?
Yeah, we're getting ready to launch a citywide neighborhood watch program. We're waiting on the city website to get a glitch out, so you can go on the website and sign up for it. Anybody that's interested in neighborhood watch, just stick around afterwards. I'd love to get your name and phone number. By doing that doesn't mean you're going to be a block captain or have any special extra duties, but we just like to try to get the whole city covered if we can. So anybody wants to sign up, we'd love
Next
to have
question.
you.
Can RCS, Rancho San Clemente Business Park owners enforce the code of no overnight camping, including RVs?
That's good years.
Oh, yeah, that's a trespass. As was mentioned earlier, it's a trespass. If you want to close your parking lot to that and it's private, or it's a private street, that association has the ability to enforce that by showing that they have that policy that's properly posted, giving warning and calling the sheriff.
And that was the second part of the question, is if
Sorry?
they could, that was the second part of the question, is if they could post no trespassing signs and
Yes.
hire private security.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I don't want to slow you down. They're pretty good at it in town. Pico Plaza, they have to have local policies about where you can stand, who can panhandle, who can't. And they're really good at it, and the sheriff's really dialed in, and I love it when they lie to me, when they're panhandling or being vagrant there, because I know better that the owner doesn't allow it, and the sheriff knows the owner doesn't allow it, and it's a trespass.
How or what do we need to do to increase the number of OCSD deputies in San Clemente?
Well, that's I think each one of the council members need to respond to this. About every deputy, on average, if you look at what the OCSD contract is and the number of deputies we have, we're at about $300,000 a year per deputy. A lot of that, a lot of that's driven by the other services that OCSD provides to us. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a budget buster to do it, particularly as the deputies union goes into labor negotiations with the Board of Supervisors, and we see significant pay increases for the deputies. I'm going to be of the opinion that there's a lot of work to be done in this city. A lot of it could be done by community service officers. A lot of it could be done by code compliance. So I would like to take the deputies and put them on what they do best, and bring in some lower cost resources in to address some of the homeless issues. And I think code, park rangers, and even hiring more CSOs might do the job there, particularly as it relates to parking issues. Mayor Pro Tem?
So I've been on the record saying we should fund additional sheriff's deputies, and we got support actually from folks on the council here with me. But what we heard from Captain Benfield, and I'll let him sort of talk about it more in depth, was that he does not feel he needs that additional resource right now. He'd always take additional resources, but not quite necessary, and he can explain that further. But the process is we would do that during our budgeting time, right? So you don't sort of do this just willy-nilly in the middle of the year. You wait until we run through our whole budget, because if we do increase that funding for San Quentin Police Services, it's going to have to be adjusted with other parts of the budget. So that's when we would do it, which is May?
Coming up.
March.
Yeah.
March. So that's when you would go back and work with the sheriff's department and sort of figure out, because you don't just get one deputy, right? You need 4, I think, to cover one shift. So it would be an additional expense, but we've been supporting that, but they haven't thus far said that they need that to get the job done in town.
Right. The premise of the question is, can we get more police officers? Suggests that we need more police officers to reduce the crime. And as has been suggested, I mentioned it, Gene just mentioned it, we can do a lot of the work with increased code enforcement, volunteers, RSVP volunteers, not just senior reserve, but younger people. I imagine there are a lot of them in our town that'd be willing to help. But the larger issue of crime deals with the environment that we're in. We have to respond to the laws that we're subject to. Those laws are made in Washington, D.C. and Sacramento. We have a current administration that believes in open borders, so the crime cartels are coming. Those folks are coming in here. We have a zero bail issue, which increases our crime. We've got a catch and release mentality that increases our crime. We're taking felonies and making them misdemeanors, which means crime is more rampant. And we've had Sacramento that has recently defunded the gang investigation services. That's important. So the federal and state rules that we live under are significant. And, we need to respond to crime appropriately. One of my favorite scriptures in Ecclesiastes says, because there's no sudden punishment for wrongdoing, the heart of man is set intently to do evil. We need to respond quickly. And it's difficult in Sacramento and Washington. And we've got 2 representatives here from Sacramento, our Assemblywoman Davies, Senator Pat Bates. I'd like to hear from a regional perspective their thoughts on crime overall, if that's possible.
Assemblywoman? Come on.
Thank you. And can you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. And again, thank you for your service. We know how tough that is for you up there. And we also know that right now there is a shortage, and it really recruiting to begin with, to try to get good officers like yourself because of the environment and the danger we've put them in. But when you talk about crime, that's exactly what we're looking at. When you're up there and you're on the floor and you have, and I say this way, not to be political, we don't have a balance. We have a 2/3 ruling up there. So when you don't have a balance up there, there's no discussion. You basically have one agenda, and that agenda gets pushed through. So no matter what party it is, we have to have balance so we can have common sense conversations and thought. And we have to remember, again, as he was talking about the care core that Governor Newsom pushed through. I think it's a great start. I was a conservator. I had a sister-in-law who was manic depressive back before we changed law, where we did have Fairview, where they could be picked up, they could go get the treatment that they needed to get. I'd get a call. That changed. And so it was the right of some to basically be on the street, whether they were an addict or had mental issues. This is a start. But the problem is, sure, this will let someone decide if they want to have the help, but most of these people are not able to make a common sense decision because of the mental illness and the addiction. So that's what we have to change. We have to be able to give them the opportunity to bring someone in for more than 72 hours and give them the help they need. But we also can't just leave them after 30 days. And that was the problem, especially with Prop 47. 30 days when they did have rehabilitation, you put them back out after 30 days, they're going to go right back. We have to be able to be with them until the end. They have to learn how to manage their addiction and their mental illness and their treatments. That's how it's done. But we also have to do one thing I think that is very important when it comes to crime, when it comes to homelessness. We've got to do a public audit, because because we've spent so much of your taxpayer dollars throwing it at the homelessness, and guess what? It keeps increasing. No more, there aren't any extra people getting homes. There's no more people doing this. It might be enough, but not with billions and dollars. And this is the same thing when it comes to the crime rate. You know what? Your dollars, where is it going? We are handcuffing our law enforcement to be able to do what they need to do, to not only protect you, but to protect themselves. So for me, the number one thing we need to do is an audit, a public audit. So these numbers come out, you see where your money is going for homelessness, because it all comes together. Homelessness and crime come together. They work together here. And we have to start having some tougher laws up there, because there's no accountability. You have smash and grab. You have, you have break-ins. And you know what? Depending what it is, they have to sometimes release them. They spend more time having to book them, and then they get released. And when we saw COVID, they were out there with the zero bail. And trust me, they were trying to push it. They didn't get it through, but they tried to push it. And that's where they were actually picking up someone robbing or stealing a car 4 times. Instead of them taking calls to an emergency that could be something in your house or somebody else's or something in a school, they're having to do this. So until we start electing people that have balance and common sense and put you first before the criminal, because right now the criminal is the victim and you're not. And that's what we have to change up there.
And you're going to go back to Senator Bates, right?
Well, thank you for letting me be a drop-in, you guys. I just came from another forum where some of these same things were discussed. I think that Lori really put it in a great perspective of what we need to do. But the most difficult thing that's come into, I think, the whole criminal justice system is the theory that we have to have criminal justice reform, and that is about getting soft on crime and accountability. I sit on the Senate Rules Committee where we interview the governor's appointments, and we get the parole board in there. And I was a social worker for many years ago and dealt with many of these same problems that are here and actually have grown. So the idea with criminal justice reform is that we're going to have all these programs out in the community so people can return to polite society, be productive citizens, and we're going to provide them the opportunity with good behavior in prison. They can come out to the communities, and they're all going to get all of these, they're going to get treatment, mental health treatment, they're going to get education, parenting skills, all of that. And so when I asked the parole board, how are we doing on that? They can't answer the question that there's any data showing that those programs are working and that they're even here, because the people that are responsible for putting them on is law enforcement in the local governments. So that's a real huge gap in what we're hearing about criminal justice reform and a more compassionate approach to hopefully putting people back on the right track. So we have to raise our voices outside that building. It's all of you have to start connecting directly with your representatives, the governor's office, the parole board. Let them hear from you that certainly we don't want our prisons full of people, no way. But we have to have programs. If you really believe that we can rehabilitate everyone, you've got to have the programs, and they have to be there for the youth in particular. I will tell you, I have introduced over 6 years in our Senate bills to rein in the fentanyl crimes. The people that are producing and manufacturing and importing that poison to our communities, and they have been killed for 6 solid years, never getting out of the Public Safety Committee on the Senate side. Several bills others have introduced on the Assembly side because they don't want sentence enhancements, which all of those bills have. If you produce and import fentanyl, you get a sentence enhancement, much of which would put you in jail for 25 years. Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we take the big cartels and put them in jail, cut the head off the snake? We might succeed, but we can't be looking at sentence enhancements, because that puts people in jail longer and they don't have an opportunity for rehabilitation. I have argued this in our public safety committees with Sheriff Barnes sitting next to me, with the crime lab, head of the crime lab of the County of Orange, sitting right there talking about how this is imported, how the analogs are made, how it kills people. They shut off Sheriff Barnes' microphone. Didn't want to hear anymore. There's going to be no bills that come out of this committee that have sentence enhancements. That's the way it is. So we have to raise our voices about how the communities are basically bearing the brunt of a philosophy that's wonderful. It's a noble effort, but it ain't working because we do not have the money to have the programs that we need to rehabilitate these people. And if it flows down our way, then fine, we'll do the job. Music Jail will be opening up, I believe. That's a facility that's going to be open in about a year. It actually started when I was on your Board of Supervisors in 2014, 12, 13, 14. It's finally coming to fruition. Why? It's all about money. We had $57 billion surplus, and we couldn't get them to put $10 billion into the care court. They're asking the counties to run that program. 58 counties, orange counties in the first wave, $3 billion for about 15 of the counties that are supposed to do that program. And we don't even have the beds or the facilities that will house these people that the court determines have to be placed in a facility that long. So there's a lot of political theater that goes on, you guys. I've been doing this for many, many years. I'm tired of the scripts. I'm tired of the theater that we all watch. Pull the curtain back and it's just wonderful. We're going to do all this. Close that curtain, nothing happens. A month later, you got the same play going on with the same script. And we're all supposed to believe that the moon is made out of green cheese. Just look up there and you'll see that. That's almost how ridiculous it is with some of the things that you hear come out of Sacramento. So raise your voices. Write those letters. Don't email. Take and write it out, put a stamp on it, and send it to the governor's desk and say, enough is enough. We are giving you $57 billion extra dollars, and it's not coming back to do the job that you say needs to be done. Well, have at it, you guys. So I'm kind of mad tonight.
Thank you, Senator Bates.
For our electeds, there are tax-paying residents that are afraid to use the city's amenities, such as the trails and the beach. What will the elected officials do to rectify that?
I think enforcement. We have to have the sheriff's department down there. Our beaches, our trails, our parks need to be safe. They need to be clean. They need to be clear of urine and feces. And the only way that's going to happen is if they're physically patrolled. And perhaps, Captain Benfield mentioned earlier, we don't have a beach designated team, but maybe we need my philosophy is you focus on the hot spots. If we've got a problem at the beach, that's where we put our people. I live in Rancho San Clemente. We don't have a crime problem. We're a great community. The neighbors know each other. It's not a problem. But in other areas, it is a problem. Instead of distributing our resources evenly over the city so everybody gets an equal share of our police department, we need to focus on the hot spots and make sure that we have extra resources there. We marshal our resources effectively to where the issue is. And right now it is down by the beach. So my thinking is, and I would encourage Captain Benfield, we've talked about it, he's actually been doing it, which is good, but we focus on the hot spots.
I agree with all that, and I would add that the use of code compliance and park rangers, which will cost us a lot less and not be a budget buster, I think there's a lot they can do to alleviate the problem. And at our next council meeting, I think council, we will. I'm not going to give any direction, okay? But because this is not a city council meeting. But I think it's one of the things we need to look at in giving direction at the next council meeting to the city manager.
Thank you. And we have about 5 minutes. Do we want to go across the panelists to give closing comments?
How many more questions do you have?
Probably about 14.
I want to.
If I could just comment, a question was asked me and Councilmember Duncan about FAM a while back, and they wanted to know why I voted a certain way. And I didn't respond because this wasn't a meeting about FAM, but FAM, does a good service for people that are in need, for families that are about to be homeless. They do a great job. Now, it's also true that they distribute food, and it's also true that some homeless people actually eat that food and carry it. My thinking and why I voted the way, and I explained this when the vote was taken, I think we can't outlaw compassion. people, churches and organizations that want to help people need to help people. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, we got to kick these people out of town. Their lease will expire someday. They will move on. They do serve communities greater than San Clemente. But my thinking was simply that people that volunteer their time and their resources to help other people ought to be encouraged, ought to be supported, and ought to be applauded. And that's not to say I'm in favor of crime and homelessness. That's ridiculous. I'm not. But that's why I supported FAM's extension on their lease. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
So FAM serves all homeless in Southern Town, all, not just San Clemente. And in order to get services per Elizabeth and Roddy, they have to come to FAM in San Clemente, our headquarters here. Once a homeless person gets here, they don't leave. So what guardrails is City Council gonna put in place to check that? Thank you.
And good point. Good point.
I met a lady today, she was on the bus stop right in front of, across the street here. And I asked her, I go, can I help you? And she said, I'm trying to get up to Van. I said, where did you come from? Well, someone gave me a bus ticket. She says a hospital, I don't know if that was true or not, because I can't imagine the hospital giving her a bus ticket. And they didn't tell me how many hills St. Clemente had, and I'm exhausted, and I'm tired, and I'm hungry. So again, I have no place to live, I have no place to sleep tonight. So she's here for me. How are we supposed to absorb all these people that come from Van?
That also helps them prepare to file for disability because they're a drug addict. So they set up a disability check coming their way. They help them set up for EBT cards. And they have almost unlimited food supply to the homeless. The single mother who is struggling to make her rent and groceries, you get one shot coming in once a month, okay? So there's a big disparity there as far as all the homeless coming there, being educated how to get more money, have food as much as you want, and take it into the canyon and eat till your heart's content.
And cook it out there. Next question.
Why are other cities not being bombarded with overnight RV and car camping?
Captain Benfield, can you respond? I have no idea.
I really can't. I don't know what's going on in other cities. I don't know that they aren't being bombarded with RVs. I don't know. I would be highly suspicious that this is unique to San Clemente, but it could be. I just don't know.
Is it illegal to set up your RV on the street, run your generator, and do repair on your RV?
So kind of along the lines of what we were talking about earlier, there could be some things that are illegal. There could be some things that are not. If you see something, call us. We will go out and investigate. If there's a crime to be enforced, we're happy to do that. We can't go through every potential possibility, but in some cases there may not be anything to enforce, and others there may.
Do OCSD officers enforce parking hours?
Yes, but I assume they mean in the areas where it's overnight precluded from parking or 5 hours, these sort of things. They do. We have traffic officers, CSOs, and motor patrol, plus regular deputies can go. In addition to the RSVPs, they help out with parking meters and those sort of parking issues. But yeah, we do. If they see it, call us. We'll send somebody out.
Can we have weekly cleaning of the sidewalks on Del Mar?
Can we have, what was the question? Can we have regular?
Weekly cleaning.
We ought to have weekly cleaning and as frequently as it gets urinated and defecated on. It's disgusting, and that's, it needs to be cleaned up on a regular basis, more frequently than it is. And when the council members, myself included, and others, receive notification about particularly bad situations, we notify staff and it's cleaned up. It may not be cleaned up to the satisfaction of some people, but generally it's cleaned up. But clearly that needs to be regular. This is a problem that doesn't appear to be going away anytime soon, and it needs to be addressed on a regular, consistent basis. And I think that's our jewel is the Del Mar and that T section there. We got to keep it clean, we got to keep it nice. It's
I think
essential.
Cecilia coming up to address that?
Yeah, I believe that Public Works is coming back to the city council in the next meeting or two to talk about that. It was council direction.
That's exactly right. That's what, I was just going there with you.
Yeah.
So Tuesday night.
You want to summarize that? I don't know if everybody could hear that.
So that issue is coming back to council. I don't know whether it's coming back to council on the 1st or the 15th of November.
The first.
The 1st. Okay, so the next council, next week, we're going to be talking about that at council. And that was at council direction.
Do you want me to continue? Is there more that can be done to clean up North Beach?
Wow. What a loaded question. It's going to be law enforcement, it's going to be OCSD, it's going to be code, it's going to be the behavioral specialists we have from OCSD, it's going to be code compliance, it's going to be our homeless outreach person, and we just hired a second one. But it's a great point, and I think we need to redouble our efforts because I'm not at all pleased with what's going on at North Beach right now.
It's kind of like whack-a-mole, you know? You see an encampment, you go out there, code enforcement shows up, the deputies show up, they're moved, and comments have been made earlier tonight about the concept of just move along, just move along. Well, you have to move along. You can't set up your shop, set up your home, and then come back the next day and do it again. I think it requires persistence. It requires consistency, and we can't let up, because the minute you let up, people go, "Oh, I've been here 2 days, no one said anything, I'm going to stay." And the buddy comes by and says, "You've been here 2 days, I think I'll join you." And then a week later, another group is there, then they move, but you have to keep on it consistently. You can't get lazy, because it isn't going to solve the problem. So our people have to continue strongly.
Yeah, can I add this?
Yes, go ahead.
We can all be reporters and deputies too. When I walk with my wife, I have the phone because I have the weaker health. I'm going to need the doctor if something happens. And she's always telling me, take a picture of that graffiti, send it to your friend, Adam. Send it to the Talega Association. If there's stuff that looks like it shouldn't be there, people call and say, I witnessed a public urination. When? 4 hours ago. And did you have your camera? Could you film a video? So there's so much help you can do to a prosecutor, to a deputy, to our code and rangers, if you help.
This gentleman had a question, I think it's on point. You want to ask your question?
I'm frustrated. I live in North Beach, and I'm there all the time. And it's frustrating here that I'm supposed to call the police, I'm supposed to do all the observations, I should be out there at midnight tonight, making sure there's no one out there tonight. That's insanity, with all due respect. Okay, and I shouldn't be expected, or anyone else wouldn't be expected to do the job of law enforcement. There's a woman who literally has made camp, I'm not kidding you, because I lived there, for not less than 6 months. Okay, off and on. And before that, she lived up the street, right by where you all have breakfast, sir. Okay, and she was there for probably 4 months before that. Okay, people bring her food, critical help her out, it's insanity. Okay, I don't understand how that could happen with all you're saying. But more importantly, we can't be the police department, we can't call, you know what, when you call, no one comes out, with all due respect. Okay, no one comes out. Okay, I know that, I've witnessed it, I've experienced it, I've lived there for 10 years. I lived in Talega for 15 before that, so I've seen both sides of this community, and my family's lived here for 40 years. Okay, so I remember when we had our own police force, they took care of business, and we didn't have any problems. And I'm frustrated, but I'd like to understand how it is that that woman can be there for all those weeks and live there with nobody moving her. She doesn't move. She literally wakes, I see her wake up in the morning and go to bed at night.
Now, the only thing I'll say to that is she has been moved several times. She's been put into, I know exactly who you're talking about, she's been put into permanent supportive housing. She doesn't obey the rules, and then she gets sent back to San Clemente.
Why, how can she get a pass?
Go ahead, Tony.
Again, this is something that people don't like to hear, but what we discovered, that we kind of discussed this earlier, absent a separate violation, we can't enforce camping ordinance or loitering. And so,
Not to interrupt you, but she's doing all the things we're defining as being setting up home, as Councilmember Novak is saying, is that she has a bed, she's got a tent, she's got her stuff, I don't even understand how she gets it all there.
yeah. No, I'm familiar with the person you're talking to. She's actually gone all last week and she's back now. Yeah. No, and like has been stated, there are limitations with what we can and cannot do. And some of those things are simply unenforceable. However, I will tell you that the sheriff's department is down there. You live there, I'm sure you see them. We're down there on a daily basis, as is code enforcement's homeless outreach people, offering resources and enforcing where we can. She's been cited several times by my current behavioral health deputy for violations of law, smoking on the beach, you name it. She's persistent and she understands the regulation, whether she's being advised or whether she's learned on her own, and many of them have, so they understand how to skirt the regulation and get around the requirements. But again, we cannot ask her to move along. That's not within our authority. She's a human being just like everyone else. And I'm not arguing with you or taking your side. I do take exception to the you call the police and deputies don't respond. They might not respond right away. Again, we get back to the priority. But if you call and dispatch takes your call, a deputy goes out. That's been the sheriff's department's mantra for decades, and we are proud of that we don't take many calls over the phone. We send a deputy. You want to talk? We'll come to your house. You will have to wait based on a priority system, so I understand that you may not see them when they respond, but I guarantee you they're responding. Again, unfortunately, it's a public nuisance. It is an eyesore. There are concerns related to health and safety, but that falls way down the spectrum compared to all of the other calls that are occurring, particularly at night in the city.
But I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor this. My information is that in the business I'm in, if I don't take care of problems today, they're there tomorrow, and I take care of them today. And if we were to take a moment and start really fighting for our community, we would see change, because it's too comfortable for these folks to be here. Okay? It's way too comfortable, and it's time for us to stop allowing that happening. And that requires not us calling, but you guys putting more people on the street, more things, and actually, Councilmember Knoblich had a good idea about having more people that are volunteers and things like that. They gotta be deputized, and we have to make a stand in our community because it's going downhill. There's a gentleman, I couldn't believe it, that put two tents together in the rocks on the train track there. I don't know who runs the train tracks, but that's shocking, and he lived there for like 3 days. Literally underneath these things. How could you be down there every day and allow that? That sounds like an absolute dangerous thing. You have a train going by at whatever miles an hour. How could that have been left alone?
Yeah, but we can't walk within 15 feet of a train track. That's a federally owned thing. Why is that not? I mean, it's a little.
Okay. So, okay.
Can we revise our ordinances so that we can have stricter requirements for RVs?
You know, the RV thing is new. I heard that for the first time in a public comment. So it's on my list of things to research, work with the sheriff and their council on, and learn more about. Yeah.
Would unlocked bathrooms and or maintained porta potties be a solution to the urine and defecation at North Beach?
I doubt it.
It's almost like the concept, build it and they will come. You know, you need it, but you put it out there and you just attracted people to say, I'm going to stay within a radius of my porta potty. You know, that's a tough one. It's a tough one.
Does San Clemente have fewer deputies per capita than any other community?
Any other community, right, is going to be very, very difficult to answer.
Served by OCSD?
It depends. It's based generally on population calls for service. I think Councilmember Ferguson presented a slide which showed kind of the per 1,000 statistic. We have 37 deputy sheriffs assigned to this city with some 68,000 people, around 19 square miles. And so to get back to a common theme here about putting out hotspots and why don't we see them and why do we have to call, that is a finite number of deputies. If you take away your behavioral health deputy, your motor officers, your school resource officers, you're left with 30 deputies to patrol this city 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They simply cannot be everywhere at once. And they're being asked to do a tremendous amount of work in a city that's already generated 25,000 calls for service this year. It's a big ask. and we do what we can, and we do allocate resources based on what we consider to be community priorities. But that's like, I could ask everyone in this room, what's the top priority? I know what yours is, right? And I know what someone in Telegas is going to be burglary. There's not enough police officers to do that. And so we do everything that we can, but keep in mind, you're going to get everyone's got an opinion, right, on what should be our priority.
So, Captain Penfield, should we look at the possibility of establishing an additional patrol area, which would be, I think, 5.2 deputies, right?
There's a number of options for the councils, right? This is council purview. There's a number of options we could discuss, recommendations we could make on community interest, okay? I hear you guys, I understand clearly. Homeless is number one in this town. Parking is probably a close number two. Depending on the week, it could be e-bikes or burglaries as things pop up. We get it. There are a number of additional deployment models, to the mayor's point, remaining fiscally conservative. And back to Kathy Ward's original point, it's been echoed here tonight, that I also agree that part of fiscal responsibility falls on us, and that we agreed to a contract at the beginning of the year that I still stand by. I think it's adequate for what we currently do. But as more and more things pop up, we can't simply say, we'll focus on this, because our priority is still calls for service, and we only have a certain number of deputies. So whether or not it's 5.2 deputies or we do a blended model, we add, was mentioned by Rick Loeffler, add to a team that can focus on hotspots as they pop up. There's a number of things we could do, and we could employ people besides Sheriff's Department personnel, to include park rangers, code enforcement, CSOs, as was mentioned, to help keep those costs down. Believe it or not, I treat our budget very seriously. I treat it like it's my own money. That's why last year I was super happy to almost hit our budget on the head. We gave back a tiny fraction of what the city historically gives back, anywhere from $200,000 to over $1 million. Last year, I think we gave back $60-something thousand, and that was COVID reimbursement money we didn't even know was coming. Otherwise, the city would have owed us $600. We were that close, and I take that seriously. That's part of my job, because I'm a taxpayer too, and I know public safety is expensive, and so I'm not going to just sit here day after day and say we need more cops, we need more cops. I'm going to do everything that I can to work with the community, which involves community support. I don't expect you to be the police, but I absolutely need your assistance. We can't be everywhere. You guys have more eyes than we do. If you see something, we appreciate a call so that we can address it, because we're tackling an entire city's worth of problems at any given time of the day.
Next question.
2 status questions. Is there someone living on the beach trailhead for the past 3 months with all of their belongings?
I think that we just talked about that.
Thank you. And there was a vehicle in the industrial area that had expired plates, windows papered up, and moving things from the bus to the trunk of the vehicle. Is there any status update on that?
I don't know. That,
Okay. Wait.
That's the one that had the Colorado plates. They were living in there, and then they were driving a $120,000 Mercedes, and then the next day he switched to California tax. His Colorado tax were expired by 2 years.
I saw the park rangers dealing in that area, and they said they had reported that to OCSD. I don't know whether they did or what the outcome of that was. Okay.
I really can't comment about. There's an interesting phenomenon in this city, and I'm sure in every other, because this is my first experience kind of in this role with a city, is that you may or may not believe the number of complaints that don't come to us, that either go by email or phone call to someone on the council when it's directly related to public safety. So sometimes we find out days later, when we're looped in, that, hey, there's a situation occurring, and we'll send somebody to it. And Rick has seen that firsthand regarding a different vehicle that was being used similar to what you're talking about. And we went out and it was expired more than 6 months. We towed it and removed it, right? But we need those calls to come to us. Guaranteed a deputy or a parking officer will go out and enforce what we can. Again, the registration is not much we can do, maybe a citation. If it's more than 6 months, could be towed.
Is a safe parking site being considered for San Clemente?
No.
That was no.
Council members, do you want to talk about your accomplishments for city safety?
Do we want to?
Well, I think number one, I don't think we should, we can talk about individual accomplishments, but number one, building a $3.4 million police station compared to what the deputies had before is a pretty significant accomplishment. I would also say that we have been focused repeatedly on this. I take I take 4 or 5 calls a day, and I'm calling Adam, I'm calling the city manager, and reporting this. So I'd say I've been pretty engaged, and Eric will tell you he's probably seen me in North Beach a lot, and so that question took me by surprise, but I've been doing a lot.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I think there's a sort of a collaborative benefit, I think, with this latest Talega thing, right? We had the citizens come to us, we took immediate action, we engaged with Tony, came back from vacation early. We got the TRIP team out there, which is a great model. I know Mr. Loeffler's talked about that, right? Because they're very dynamic, and they can get into communities and act more quickly than the uniform folks. So I think that was a collaborative effort for all of us that did have an impact, right? We were able to catch one of these groups when we hadn't caught one before. So I think that's a good model for future, and some of this is part of that.
And
right?
I would also say, to interrupt you, I would also say, meeting with that neighborhood group that evening went a long ways in people realizing that this council was engaged. We even brought Captain Benfield off of vacation that night, or it was his last day of vacation. But having that meeting, that second meeting in Talega, went a long ways, and Captain Benfield has a successful conclusion to that after that meeting.
Yeah, we've attended the community meetings out in Talega. Police is important. It's our number one priority. If the community's not safe, nothing else matters. This really is our number one priority. And to go beyond what we're currently facing with the Chilean crime gangs and the open borders and the soft on crime approach that our society is slouching towards, unfortunately. A concern of mine, and I asked Sheriff Barnes about this recently, I said, what happens when this city experiences a major event, a 9-point earthquake, a nuclear detonation, something where 37 police officers can't respond to protect our community? What kind of backup plan do we have? Do we have a civilian force, so to speak, of people that are willing to stand up, ex-military, ex-police? And he explained there's a plan in place. First of all, there are three or four tiers. First tier is we look to the other communities that have forces they can deploy for us, but they're probably going to be in the same situation. And then they have some other layers of support, including people they can call on that are post-certified. But to me, in the environment that we live in, where our president's talking about nuclear war casually, it seems to me that we need to think bigger, unfortunately, than just our the poop on Del Mar and the problems. But in my thinking, I think this community and every community in Southern California in an urban area needs to think, if we have a situation where Tony's 37 officers are caught, half of them, or a portion of them are caught at their homes in Mission Viejo, and we have an event like that, are they going to be able to drop their families and come running here? I don't think so. So I think we need to think more in terms of expanding our RSVP volunteers, our code enforcement volunteers, our park rangers, and building a cadre of people that are saying, we're about safety in this town. We're about eyes and ears on the ground, and we're about deploying where we need to be when we need to be there. And so it's sort of a bigger problem that we're here discussing tonight, but it's one that concerns me and one that I think someday needs to be addressed properly.
Next question.
Okay, and with that, the last questions are there homeless people regularly found in Talega, and are they committing burglaries in Talega? And maybe in answering that question, we can review the tips that we started with about community safety.
Speak up, Amanda. What did you say?
I said my question wasn't read.
Which one was that?
Well, what is it?
Well, then, yeah, what is it?
I didn't want to interrupt that, but basically, you meant Captain Benfield mentioned city ordinance, and my memory is kind of vague here. I don't know if it's 10.23.280 or 10.28.230. But in that RV parking restrictions, it's for day and night. But it also has an exception of an OCSD officer giving a permit of 6 permits per year. And I know he has been abused by a couple people where they wanted to park right in front of their home for about a week. So they just kept on getting these permits to do that, rather than going to Dam de San Onofre or State Park, and they did that. Is there any way we can amend that ordinance to decrease the amount of permits per year?
Wow, that's a lot. Go ahead.
I've never thought of that. That's a great, very creative idea that we ought to look at. And we can look at if you advance that to the council.
Scott, could you recap that and send it to me, and then I'll run
Yeah,
with it?
would you mind just,
Sure, absolutely.
yeah, giving us that, and we'll follow up on it.
We're fighting the Knackford Park RV situation at
Yeah.
Knackford Park and Las Palmas. I really looked into that ordinance, and that was one of the problems, that when I would call, they would say, well, that person has a permit now. Or does that, but.
We'll
I kept
brush up
calling
on all
the
this,
same
yeah.
People, the same RV,
Uh-huh.
and it's like, okay, this is already extended to 6 already.
Oh, yeah, that's for the extended loading, unloading, if you're going away for a weekend. I know, yeah.
Right.
We'll follow up on how that works and if that could be tightened. Can I go to the Talega one?
Yes, please.
Talega, Reserve, Rancho San Clemente, those areas are large holdings of private property. No one should be camping there. It's trespass. So and it's open space, private and public open space here, especially during high fire hazard season, don't allow camping.
But I think the question was, do we find homeless people in Talega, and are they committing property crimes there?
So you can find homeless people anywhere, right? They move around. We do hear, obviously, about it when they end up at North Beach, when they end up in Talega, we hear about it, and we're still left with the same restrictions as far as whether or not they commit property crimes. Specific to Talega, I can't speak to any specific case of that. I can tell you they do commit property crimes, just like other members of the community, and we're commonly arresting and taking people for various crimes who are homeless. But I'll tell you, that would be a crime of opportunity. That's certainly not going to be a sophisticated or organized burglary. It would be you left your garage door open and your golf clubs or your bicycle got taken, that sort of thing generally.
Mr. Cabral.
Yeah, meeting with a lot of people, I've been told that the problem in North Beach is not the homelessness, it's the fact that there's a lot of drugs, particularly fentanyl, that's being sold in that area, which is a crime. It's not a crime of being homeless, it's drug dealing. Sure. How is that being addressed?
Captain Benfield?
Yeah, so anytime someone's contacted with drugs in the state of California, this is a cite and release offense, right? So unless you can prove sales, they're going to get a ticket and they're going to stay right where they are. We're going to collect their drugs and send that to the district attorney's office. Fentanyl is a serious problem, and it's something that was mentioned tonight, or legislation that we can't seem to get passed. It's a very powerful and dangerous drug, and yet in some cases it's treated for sentencing less than cocaine or heroin. It's a significant problem. I'll tell you, the Sheriff's Department, some stats I've been throwing around at people just for comparison. In 2021, the Sheriff's Department seized 104 pounds of fentanyl and about 16,000 pills. And in the first 8 months of this year, those numbers jumped to over 400 pounds of fentanyl and over 285,000 pills. It is the number one, OD on fentanyl is the number one leading cause of death in Orange County for those 17 and under. So it's something that we focus heavily on. Unfortunately, there's not much teeth behind those laws anymore, thanks to Prop 47, as was mentioned previously.
You know, our number one adversary in the world, Communist China, is producing the vast majority of this and bringing it in through our soft southern border. And we have an administration in Washington, D.C. that won't do anything about it. And it's disgusting, and it's killing our young people. Councilmember Knobloch and Mayor Pro Tem and I and Mr. Loeffler have a friend who just lost his 37-year-old wife to a fentanyl overdose. And it's not a ghetto thing. It's not just a youth thing. It's happening across the board. And Communist China will continue to attack us like that. And it's disgusting, and we have an administration that just sits back and watches it.
Locally, our district attorney's indicated that he would charge someone with murder if they were a fentanyl dealer and someone died. They wouldn't just be charged with drug dealing, they'd be charged for first-degree homicide. And I think it takes actions like that to get people's attention and then follow through, like the Ecclesiastes says, because there's no sudden punishment, the heart of man is set intently to do evil. And until there's punishment, until there's incentive to not do it, it's going to continue. And Todd Spitzer's approach, I think, is the right one.
Just to close out, and I think it has to do with the larger North Beach issue too. So, and I can't take full credit for this, Rick was talking about, but like we had the trip team go in with the Talega thing, could we have the trip team go down to North Beach? They'd be there to witness some of these drug deals, perhaps. At least word might get out that they're down there operating, and it would be a less attractive spot. So I don't want to get ahead of you, Tony, but like just a thought, right, to get ahead of the larger sort of homeless issue and the drug dealing issue, if there was a presence that could be rotated through there, perhaps undercover, like the trip team is, maybe we could see at least word get out that this isn't going to be a safe place to do those kind of things.
Yeah, and so here's kind of the hard truth on that, is the trip team, that's one of the benefits of it, that's why we have one, is they can be redeployed to do anything. They don't answer calls for service generally unless something significant happens. The kind of the rub here is that if you look at the point in time count, one of the stats I mentioned was those that are addicted to drugs, and those countywide, we're looking somewhere around 40%, which is a decent percentage, right? Maybe not as high as some people would think, but again, we're not seeing prevalent drug dealing from the homeless. We're seeing drug use. I know that drug dealing is occurring, don't get me wrong. But generally speaking, we're seeing drug use, and those would be, again, cite and release. Unfortunately, not much more we can do with those, but it is absolutely an option.
So with that, panelists, do you have any closing comments?
No, nothing lengthy, just to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This is a number one problem in our town. Safety is the number one issue, behind that water and sewer, but safety is the number one issue. And you're all here for that reason. We appreciate it. We appreciate your support, and we need to be proactive. So you're the eyes and ears in town. I just want to say I appreciate the identification of problems and the texting and emails that you've sent to us that we've been able to forward to management. So thank you for that.
While there's no solution.
Mr. Loeffler?
Real quick.
Yes, ma'am.
I wrote one down and got lost, but what's going on with the street sweeping ticketing? It stops and starts, it stops and starts.
That's going to have to be a question for city management.
Oh, city management, okay. I just noticed.
Yeah, she's coming up.
So anyway, no solutions. I don't think anybody was probably here looking for solutions, but I can tell you honestly that every member of the city council is extremely passionate about crime and safety in San Clemente. We've put forward from our public safety committee, I don't know, 4 or 5 ordinances to get people's junk off the street, stop working on bicycles, not being on the train platform, tons of shopping carts, not being able to remove them. And I can tell you that they passed it 5-0 every single time we brought up an ordinance. And I can tell you that the police department has gone down and enforced those ordinances. And as far as Captain Benfield goes, I can tell you I've seen you more passionate tonight than I've ever seen you, and I've spent a lot of time with you. And I can tell you that while the old "my hands are tied" thing, which is true in a lot of cases, I can tell you that Captain Benfield has gone over and far above what we would expect a police department to say under these conditions, and always tried to find innovative ways to enforce the law to the umpth degree. So that's all I can say. It's been really a pleasure.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, also be quick. I think, again, going back to what we have done that maybe was missing was giving people a voice, right? Giving people an opportunity, giving you all an opportunity to come in here, share your concerns, have us address them as much as we can, and then follow up. And I think that's something that we can continue, and that wasn't necessarily the case before. People were frustrated. They didn't feel like their concerns were being heard. So that we'll continue to do that. We're doing that today, and we'll keep that going and making sure that we're going to be responsive to these concerns when they come up. So thank you again for coming.
Chief Benfield.
Again, I'll echo the sentiment. Thank everyone for coming out and for sharing their concerns. Hopefully, we were able to provide some information that you found helpful. Again, I know that there's kind of this thirst for information in San Clemente, and we're trying not to keep you in the dark. So please, if you don't follow us on social media, I believe it's in the back, our accounts, OCSD San Clemente, on all the major platforms. We push out tips, crime information, updates regularly on those. That's how we're getting information out. Plus, we hold events with the community, and I ask that you come down when you get a chance to engage in some of those and maybe learn about programs that we have and the things that we are doing. So thank you all again. I appreciate it. I know we went late. I apologize. But we're happy to get the information out to you.
I'm not going to go to the city attorney. Attorneys talk too much already.
Solutions that the public has brought to this council have been copied successfully by so many cities around the state. So we just want to thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you. And so I will finish with thanking everyone for coming out. Senator Bates was here. Assemblywoman Davies, I can't believe you spent the whole time here with us. Thank you. Captain Benfield, I know, you asked a lot of pointed questions, but I think it was all respectful, and I think it was all reasonable, rational. As for me, you send me an email, and I think Eric will tell you, I respond to those emails, and I at least to the reasonable and rational ones I respond to. And I come down and I see you, Gail, at the flower shop. Gail is at ground zero of this issue, and thank you. Yeah, thank you for coming here. But thank you everyone for being here this evening. Thank you very much. I was told not to do this. I said, they said, don't do a town hall if you don't have solutions. Well, I really don't have solutions because I needed to hear what, from you all. And I'm going to take a lot of your questions and your comments, and I'm going to formulate it for a plan I'm going to put together and discuss with other council members. I see a budget in which we add more code compliance officers, more park rangers, and we're going to have to increase their pay to do that. But I thank everyone for being here, and if we're still here a year from now talking about the same things, which we will be, but I hope we can have solutions to mitigate those problems. And I think this is something we should do on a regular basis. And thank you everyone for coming out this evening. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.